Chapter 1152. What are you going to do? Seeing Lin Wenwen's plump body in loose sportswear and sneakers, Dong Lijia asked. Dong Lijia looked at her uncertainly and asked. It couldn't be what he thought, right? Lin Wenwen said. Can't you see? I have to help your sister modify her body. Otherwise she won't let me go back. Dong Lijia was stunned again. She won't let you go back? What do you mean? Can she talk to you? Lin Wenwen nodded and said. She's actually in this body, but her mental power is too weak now. So she can't control her own body, so she asked me to help her. By the way, your sister also knows about the apocalypse, so she asked me to tell you. Then she picked up Dong Xinxin's phone and began to check the orders she had placed last night. Last night, she had placed orders to buy things. Because there were too many orders, many shop owners looked for her to discuss the time, afraid that she would return the order and find another shop. She placed large orders, which made many shop owners happy and worried at the same time. They were happy that they could make a lot of money, but worried that they didn't have enough goods. The most important were rice, flour, medicine, and some packaged food. Fortunately, Dong Xinxin had a lot of money in his small coffer, and the things he bought were enough for the survivors in the base to eat for several years. She also found some farm owners and bought a batch of seeds. She was going to bring them back for her sister to plant. Did she ask you to tell me? Then how did she know? By the way, you said you are a psychic, so did you come back from the apocalypse? And then appeared in my sister's body? But why my sister's body? You can't go back with your own body. Dong Lijia had a lot of questions in his mind, and he was very confused. Lin Wenwen looked up at him. Huh? Didn't I tell you last night that I came back from the future? Oh, it seems that I only told you about the apocalypse in 3 months. Then she remembered that she didn't say everything last night, so she continued. Yes, I came back from 2024. But it wasn't me who wanted to come back, nor was it me who wanted to take over your sister's body. It was her who inexplicably brought me back. Do you think I want to come back? After saying that, she glanced at Dong Lijia and looked down at her phone again. Dong Lijia stared at her in a daze. After a while he stood up and said, I still don't believe what you said. If you can let my sister come out and talk to me, I will believe you. Lin Wenwen waved his hand at him. TSK, I know you won't believe me so easily. Do as you see fit. Oh yes, don't forget to lend me some money. Borrow as much as you can. Don't be frugal. It'll be useless in 3 months anyway. She still had to use the money to order some fresh fruits and vegetables for the season. If I lend it to you, how are you going to pay me back? Dong Lijia suddenly asked. He wanted to ask why he lent it to her. However, when he thought about how he could make the other party owe him a favor, he didn't mind it at all. After all, if it was really as the other party said, the money would be nothing more than a piece of waste paper in 3 months. TSK, you want me to pay it back? I was brought back by your sister for no reason, and now I have to help her lose weight and do this and that. Doesn't your sister owe me? I'll tell you about the end of the world. This is information that no one can buy with money. You want me to pay it back? Do you want it or not? Lin Wenwen immediately exploded when she heard that the brat wanted her to pay him back. Although it sounded nice to say that she was borrowing the money, she actually wanted him to pay her back. But this brat still wanted her to pay him back. Oh, then no need. No need. Dong Lijia was a little stunned by her fierceness. He looked at his sister's familiar face with a completely unfamiliar expression and gaze. Dong Lijia deeply felt that it was very strange and out of place. Only then did Lin Wenwen let go of the hands that had rushed in front of him and grabbed his collar. She then clapped her hands and walked out of the room. She took the keys, phone, and earplugs and went out to find a place to run. When she came out of the living room, she saw 2 rows of bodyguards in black, standing on both sides of the stairs to the main door. Was this a local tycoon or a mafia family? It was very uncomfortable to stand like this early in the morning. Lin Wenwen walked down and saw the strong old man from last night standing in the first place. He nodded slightly to himself. Second miss, do you need breakfast? Oh, not now. I'll eat after I come back from my run. Lin Wenwen rubbed her chubby face and said calmly to the butler. Running. As soon as the words left her mouth, the old butler's expression froze. The other 2 rows of bodyguards also turned their heads to look at her, but when they remembered their identities, they quickly turned their heads back and stood straight without looking sideways. Was it going to rain? Their second miss actually said she wanted to go jogging. Someone who was unwilling to walk more than 100 meters suddenly said she wanted to go jogging. Was she going to make a fuss about losing weight again? Lin Wenwen calmly walked past the 2 rows of bodyguards who were 8 meters and 9 meters tall. For some reason, she felt that she was very short. She was indeed very short, at Dong Xinxin's height. After she walked out of the main door, the old butler immediately gestured to the bodyguards behind him. Immediately, 6 black-clothed bodyguards left the formation and followed Lin Wenwen out. At this time, Dong Lijia also came down from upstairs. He looked around and asked Xinxin went out. The old butler immediately nodded to him. Yes, she said to go jogging. Dong Lijia thought for a moment. Then don't worry about her. I have something to discuss with you later. After Lin Wenwen walked out of the mansion, she stretched out her hands and walked in the front yard. She wanted to familiarize herself with the terrain first, and then find a place to run. Although she knew that there should be a gym in this mansion, Lin Wenwen liked to run outdoors. The air was fresher. When she came in by car last night, she found that the mansion's yard was very big. There were neatly trimmed shrubs and flowers in the front yard. There was also a beautiful and elegant fountain statue between the front gate and the mansion gate. Lin Wenwen walked from the front yard to the backyard. There were many trees planted in the backyard, so the view was not as wide as the front yard. But the air in the backyard was very good. She stopped and took a deep breath. No matter how many times she took a deep breath, she could feel the difference between the air in the apocalypse and here. She didn't know if it was the influence of her state of mind, or if the difference was really that big. After walking around slowly, Lin Wenwen began to walk with big strides. Although she said she was going to run, she didn't run immediately. At least, she needed to adjust the rhythm of her body before she could run. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to run for long. Swinging his arms, he strode through the garden with a few bodyguards following him from a distance. Of course, Lin Wenwen knew, but she pretended not to notice. After walking around for 2 rounds, she began to pant. She adjusted her breathing, pursed her lips and continued to walk faster and faster. Chapter 1153. When Lin Wenwen began to help Dong Xinxin lose weight and exercise, the people in the base had been looking for her for 2 days, but they still couldn't find her. They were all going crazy. He didn't know where she disappeared to. She said that she was taken away by someone. They said she was taken away, but the paranormals and zombies in the base couldn't find any clues. It was impossible for someone to quietly take someone away in such a secure base without leaving a trace. But if she disappeared on her own, where did she go? Could it be that he had gone somewhere else? Did she wake up? If he were to go somewhere else, he would still be unconscious. Just the thought of it was too dangerous. Lin Feng, Lin Hao and the others were worried, but they didn't know what to do. They could only continue to investigate and search. Qiu Lily went to Ling Jing's house to play and sighed dejectedly. Where did she go? I can't find any aura or smell in her room. She just disappeared into thin air. Do you think she might have run into her personal space? I don't know if she woke up. What if she hasn't woken up yet? Her space doesn't seem to be able to store living things. Ling Jing smiled at her and comforted her. If Miss Lin really went into her space, it would be fine. That's also her ability. Her protective instinct will lead to her ability to protect her life. She should be fine. Qiu Lily came to Ling Jing's house because Lin Kuei asked her to take care of Ling Jing before he left, and also because Qiu Lily wanted to know more about Lin Kuei's past. So she would come here for a while every day. Thinking that Lin Jing was always alone, she must be lonely and bored, so it was good to accompany her. Besides, Ling Jing was a very gentle person, and she made people feel very peaceful when she was with her. So after Qiu Lily came here twice, she began to like to visit her. Really? If it's really like what you said, that's good. When she wakes up, will she come back? Hearing this, Qiu Lily's eyes immediately lit up, and she asked happily. Ling Jing nodded and said probably. Qiu Lily lay on the back of the sofa by the window, and looked out of the window with her big ruby eyes. I don't know when the leader will come back. Ling Jing also followed her gaze and looked outside, saying, I don't know. The leader's business should be very important. Perhaps he wouldn't be back so soon. You're not missing the leader, are you? Are you missing my Kuei? In the end, Ling Jing looked at Chiu Lily with a meaningful smile. Of course not. A little. I don't have any big cats to stroke these 2 days. Chiu Lily was a little shy when she heard what Ling Jing said, but she admitted it embarrassedly when she saw Ling Jing's eyes. After becoming a zombie, other than the time when she met Lin Xiao, she didn't care about anyone else so much. But ever since that male zombie turned into a big Black Panther, Chiu Lily's mind was filled with his Black Panther figure. Only occasionally would he think of Lin Kuei's face. Now that she thought about it, there was a scar on Lin Kuei's face. He wasn't a handsome man with exquisite facial features, but he wasn't ordinary either. He was a little handsome, and the 6 or 7 centimeter long scar on the corner of his eye added a trace of masculinity to him. Ling Jing said to her with a smile, You're such a strange cat lover. Shouldn't girls like cute little animals? Other girls like kittens, but you like big kittens. Chiu Lily shook her head. Kittens are cute, but I like big ones. The big one looked cute, mighty, and beautiful. I like big tigers the most. Tiger patterns are the most beautiful. Ling Jing said, Leopard patterns are also very nice. Chiu Lily sighed and said, But compared to them, I prefer tigers. Why didn't Lin Kuei become a big tiger? Ling Jing silently worried about his brother. What if one day there was a Logia that could turn into a tiger? Wouldn't he take away his invisible sister-in-law? Lin Kuei, who was far away in the northwest, had an inexplicable sense of crisis in his heart. He didn't know where it came from. He twisted his dark round head and pricked up his ears to look around, but he didn't see anything strange. After finding nothing strange, he turned his head and continued to lie on the tree branch. After turning into a Black Panther, it was not convenient for him to change back, because there were no clothes for him to wear here. Duan Wan and Shui Mingjun were sitting on a big rock not far from the tree, eating dry food and chatting. Yan Huiguang was standing gloomily on another tree 20 or 30 meters away from them. Is he always so gloomy? Duan Wan glanced at Yan Huiguang's direction and asked Shui Mingjun. Shui Mingjun took a sip of water and glanced at her after hearing her words. He said, He used to be quiet. He used to be a man who was silent and cold on the outside, but had a lot of small troubles on the inside. Duan Wan also took a sip of water and sighed. It seems that many people have changed after the doomsday. Under difficult living conditions, many people were forced to change themselves. Shui Mingjun didn't answer her, but slightly nodded to show his agreement with her point of view. What did he do before? Duan Wan asked curiously. Doctor, you don't know? Shui Mingjun said, and looked at her strangely. Duan Wan was puzzled. Should I know? Shui Mingjun shrugged. Well, not really. At this moment, Lin Kuei suddenly jumped down from the tree and said to the two, Lan Lu is back, but the leader is not with him. He smelled Lan Lu's scent, although he brought a few people. But Lin Xiao and the others were not there. The leader is not back. Then we can only continue to wait. Duan Wan stopped eating and looked at Lin Kuei. After thinking for a while, she asked, Lan Lu is back. What about their level 9 metahuman leader? Lin Kuei said, He is also here, but his breath is very weak. It seems that he is in a coma. It must be our leader who helped to knock him out. There is no need to guess. Only the leader has a way to get close to that crazy level 9 metahuman. Duan Wan said with certainty. Hearing her words, Shui Mingjun could feel from her tone how firm her confidence in the female leader was. At this time, Lin Kuei twitched his nose again and reminded them. Sikongchen is not far away. We should be careful. Speaking of Sikongchen, Duan Wan and Lin Kuei immediately became alert. She asked him, He is coming towards us? Lin Kuei shook his ears and said, Almost, we can't be sure yet, because he is still far away from us. Only then did the two relax a little. Chapter 1154. Lan Lu and Chang Qingqing took Dong Xiaowei back to their base. They drove the car out of the parking lot and got in. Chang Qingqing looked back at Lan Lu and asked, Are we going back just like that? Lan Lu looked at her strangely. What else? Do you have something else to do? Chang Qingqing shook her head and pointed at him. Not me, you. Lan Lu looked at her in confusion. What else do I have to do? My problem is him. He pointed at Dong Xiaowei, who was leaning against the back of the seat with his eyes closed. Chang Qingqing pursed her lips and said, I'm talking about a grade 8 energy core. Where are you going to get one for him? Only then did Lan Lu understand. He thought for a moment and said, Level 8 huh? There are only 3 adepts in total at the moment. There are only 2 zombie emperors, one of which has disappeared. The other one, there are quite a few level 8 mutant beasts, but there are no level 8 mutant plants. Looks like we need to get her another level 8 beast core. Good heavens, she had already obtained a level 8 fire bear's beast core. That black wolf would not be able to escape from her dark hands. Looks like the overall strength of the base is stronger than we thought. Thinking about it, although there weren't many survivors, there were still a lot of strong ones. There were a bunch of level 6 and 7 zombies. Apart from China and Haicheng, which base could have so many level 6 and 7 metahumans. Not to mention that metahumans were no match for zombies at the same level. Chang Qingqing nodded in agreement. So, you think she might not need your level 8 Arcana core so soon? Lan Lu smiled and said. She didn't say she needed it immediately, nor did she say when she would need it. Chang Qingqing rolled her eyes. You're not thinking of going back on your word, are you? Lan Lu immediately shook his head. Oh, I wouldn't dare. I'll just give it to her when she really needs it. Going back on my word. I'm afraid she'll hit me. That female zombie is very violent. Chang Qingqing turned her head and snorted disdainfully. I don't think you would dare. Even if the female leader didn't hit you, you wouldn't dare to. You have to be careful of Wu Chunyua. Lan Lu, who was forced to eat a mouthful of other people's dog food by his subordinate, looked at the side of her ear with a dark face and said, Can't you say something nice? Why was he stuffing dog food at this time? If you can't finish it yourself, why are you giving it to me? I think I need to find someone to take care of you. Chang Qingqing's ears turned slightly red. She turned around and spat at him. Bah, who asked you to be so meddlesome? Take care of yourself first, old bachelor. Lan Lu's smile cracked a little. What? What did you call me? Your brother is so handsome and suave. How can you use the ugly word old bachelor to describe me? Chang Qingqing immediately looked at him with a little horror. Do you want some face? Uncle, a man in his 30s or 40s was still handsome? Little Ming, what do you think? After that, she turned her head and patted the driver's shoulder. The young driver, Little Ming, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at her and said, Sister Qing, don't drag me into your fight. At this time, Lin Xiao led the zombies in front of a zombie beast. She turned her head to look at Ah Wang, and then looked at him in surprise. Oh, you even dared to bite the Black Wolf King's butt. Why are you hiding now? Go, it's not as advanced as you. What are you afraid of? Ah Wang, who was hiding behind Lin Xiao, stretched out his head and looked at the zombie beast standing on the stone in the distance. In the next second, he immediately retracted his hand and let out a howl. Lin Xiao had felt the aura of zombies coming from far away when she was in the poisonous miasma forest. She didn't expect that the closest one to her would be a zombie dog. It had a body of fluffy black fur, and its mouth was split open to reveal a mouthful of ferocious fangs. Those 4 fangs were long and sharp. Ah Wang was so scared that he could only hide behind Lin Xiao. It was a huge Tibetan Mastiff. It was even bigger than the Black Wolf King, and much bigger than Ah Wang. Coupled with its thick and loose dog fur, it actually looked like a bear. If it wasn't for the big tail that was curled into a circle behind it. No wonder Wang was afraid. This is a Tibetan Mastiff. As for Erwolf, Yin Xiao stood by the side and looked at the huge dog that was calmly confronting them. She then turned to look at Erwolf. Fortunately, Erwolf is not a husky. But this personality, Erwolf, is there a quarter of husky blood in your blood? Woof. Ah Wang barked at her with dissatisfaction. It's a shepherd dog. It's only at level 6, and it's twice as big as you. Yin Xiao laughed at it. Woof. How dare she laugh at it? Ah Wang's face changed. It opened its mouth and started barking at her. Why are you roaring at me? If you have the guts, go and fight it. It's your brother. It's much more amiable than the Black Wolf King. Hee. Yen Xiao didn't care about the danger it was in. She smiled and pointed at the huge dog as she spoke to Awang. Woof woof. Awang turned his head and met the gaze of the huge dog. He immediately shrank back in fear. Everyone looked at Awang's reaction and thought to themselves, has this guy met his natural enemy? Finally, someone is going to teach him a lesson. Who asked Buttface to be so fearless and to make trouble? And he's always holding us back. The hay slid down from the tree and coiled itself into a big lump. It raised its head and stared at the huge furry dog. At this moment, the zombie mastiff's big tail suddenly shook left and right. It barked at Lin Xiao and the others. Woof! Woof! Its voice was deep and resonant. After barking, it suddenly turned around and disappeared, leaving only a shadow behind. It ran away. Yi Qingxian asked curiously. I thought it was going to rush over and bite us when it barked. Lin Xiao glanced at her and said, it's still a zombie beast, even though it doesn't have any memories. But it's already at level 6. Its instincts have been awakened, and its intelligence is not low. Seeing that we are stronger than it won't leave and will be slaughtered by us. Yi Qingxian looked at Lin Xiao and said with some confusion, then you just let it go like that? Didn't you bring us here to block it? Lin Xiao pointed at the rock where the zombie mastiff had been standing and said, did you think I came here to catch it? I came here for the thing under the ground. Under the ground? Everyone was stunned and turned their heads to look. Bang! At this moment, the stone suddenly exploded, revealing a hole below it. Countless dried and cracked earthen yellow tentacles rushed out of the hole. Bang, bang, bang. At the same time, many similar branches exploded from the ground around them, waving in all directions as they surged towards Lin Xiao and the others. The aura of a level 7 mutant plant instantly spread out. Chapter 1155. Looking at the thick and long tentacles wriggling out of the ground like snakes, the zombies all scattered and retreated. Wow, what the hell is this? Yen Xiao saw these things wriggling around, and she felt goosebumps all over her body. It must be a rhizomatous plant that grows underground. Jing Yin flashed to her side, and a red flame shot out from her hand to burn the wriggling vines. The vines with the hairy roots were burned by the fire, and immediately shrunk back. Oh, it's afraid of fire. What type of mutated plant is this? Yin Xiao saw this scene and said with surprise, it's already level 7, and it's still afraid of my level 5 energy flame? Jing Yin was also slightly surprised as she stared at the tentacles. On the other side, Lin Xiao waved a large amount of black flames and pounced towards an incomparably huge strange plant in the middle of the tentacles. It was a thick plant that looked like a pineapple. It grew out of the soil and was very thick and round like a pillar. However, it was very short, only a meter or so tall. On top of it was a plant that looked like the grass on the head of the pineapple, with dozens of straight and sharp leaves that spread out. Lin Xiao could feel that there was an energy core in the thick and round pillar that really looked like a pineapple, so he specifically attacked there. Prung pung! The pineapple pillar immediately broke out of the ground, and dozens of rhizomatous tentacles broke out, but they didn't rush out to attack. Instead, they rushed out and wrapped the pineapple into a ball, helping it block Lin Xiao's flame attack. Pineapples? Pineapples can still be grown in the northwest. Isn't this a fruit from the south? Yen Xiao turned her head to look at the target of her leader's attack, and immediately saw the plant that looked like a pineapple. She then began to speak in a surprised tone. Could it be a close relative? Jing Yin said from the side, and then said to her with dissatisfaction, I say, isn't it time for you to do something? Are you still playing? Oh, coming. Yen Xiao turned her head to look at her, and then waved a fireball at the tentacles that were attacking them from all directions. This guy shouldn't be like Big Mushroom, who will suddenly jump up from the ground and run away. Yi Qingxian, who was on the other side, said curiously. Old Six flashed past him and said, maybe he'll escape underground. That was because this thing was hidden underground just now, and at this time, Yi Qingxian suddenly pointed at a crazily swinging tentacle on the other side, saying, Hey, isn't that little Nine? Is he playing on a swing while hugging it? Old Six turned his head, and saw that old Six was pointing at a tentacle as thick as an adult's arm. A person was hanging from the tentacle, swinging back and forth, as if he had touched something dirty. However, he didn't manage to shake him off. What was that idiot doing? Old Six no longer wanted to investigate Audio's brainless behavior. Now he had turned to ridicule him. I don't think the leader will let this big pineapple escape. After glancing at Audio, who was swinging, Old Six said from afar. And then his figure flashed away. Lin Xiao's black flame pounced on the huge ball wrapped by the tentacles, and the energy in the flame began to devour the energy of the tentacles. The giant ball, whose power was being devoured, immediately shook off its tentacles. Countless tentacles began to fly all over the sky, stabbing towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao's figure flashed, and suddenly appeared in front of the big pineapple, and then waved his claws and fiercely pierced it. Then, the surrounding tentacles all instantly stiffened, and after 2 seconds, they all fell to the ground. Okay, we can call it a day. When everyone saw this situation, they immediately gathered together calmly. Anyway, their job just now was to distract the mutant plant's attention, so that Lin Xiao could directly take the energy core. Lin Xiao pulled out his hand, and his hand was covered with a green viscous liquid. In his palm, there was a khaki-colored energy core flashing. After Lin Xiao took the khaki-colored energy core and left, the big pineapple began to turn dry and cracked brown. Then with a gust of wind, it began to turn into sand and scattered. On the other side, the underground gorillas that had run out of the cave waited for the sky to gradually turn dark, but they still refused to return to the cave. Then, they all hid outside until daybreak. Then, when the sky turned dark, they suddenly began to move around, but the direction of their movement was not in the direction of the base, but in the other direction. Roar, roar, roar. De Zhuang roared in the direction where the smell of the prey was more obvious, and then jumped tens of meters high. Immediately, there were many underground gorillas jumping behind him. From afar, they looked like a group of big fleas. Seeing that they weren't heading in the direction of the base, Elmar and Old Guo quietly followed behind them. Where do you think they are going? Elmar stood on the roof of a building and asked. Old Guo looked in that direction. If he guessed correctly, they would be in the zoo with the rat's nest 100 or 200 kilometers in that direction. He put his hands behind his waist and said with a hunched back, well, if I guess correctly, they should be looking for food. They should be looking for food. Elmar thought for a moment and asked, do you think they will return to the cave? The old man shook his head and said, how would I know? I'm not one of them. But what happened in the cave? Why did they all run out? Elmar asked curiously again. Won't you know if you go down and take a look? Old Guo said. Elmar turned her head and looked at him, not saying a word. Old Guo immediately looked at her with a smile. What's wrong? Are you afraid to go down? Elmar rolled her eyes at him. Hey, who said I don't dare? With that said, she turned around and leaped back into the cave in a flash. Old Man Guo didn't go with her. He just smiled and touched his beard with his hand. Then he muttered to himself, remember not to go too deep. Elmar flew back to the entrance of the cave. She looked at the edge and sniffed inside. There was still nothing but a familiar earthy smell. In order to find out why these underground gorillas suddenly ran out in the daytime and didn't go back after a night, Elmar thought it was necessary to go down and see what was going on. After entering the cave from the slope, Elmar held the wall and walked in. As she walked, she carefully sniffed the air in the cave and felt the changes in the air in the cave. After walking for half an hour, she walked into a big round cave. The top of the cave was arched, and there were several caves around it. But she didn't know where these caves led to. One of the caves was very tall, 7 or 8 meters high and 3 or 4 meters wide. This might be a special passage for the big guy. Chapter 1156. The cave was quiet. Elmar didn't notice anything unusual, and didn't smell anything. She continued to walk along the largest hole. And as she walked, the ground began to tilt downwards, as if she was going downhill. After another half an hour, she entered a large round hole. Just like this, Elmar continued to descend for 2 to 3 hours. She walked around the tunnel again and again, but still didn't find anything unusual, until she walked to a fault position. There was no road ahead. In front of her was a cliff, and 10 meters below was an underground river. The river was very big, and the water didn't look shallow. After walking here, Elmar hid and felt a different smell. It came from the river below. She squatted on the shore and looked down carefully. Through her colorless vision, she could see that there were many people below. From her colorless vision, the river should have been clear and gray, but it was black. Why was the river black? Was there a problem with the river? Was that why the gorillas ran out? Elmar stared at the river for a while, thinking about the relationship. She walked through the tunnels for 3 hours, but she didn't find anything strange. Only here, there was a smell that she couldn't explain, and she couldn't even determine the attribute of this smell. Looking left and right, there were vertical cliffs on both sides of the river, and there was no place to stand. She couldn't find a place to stand, so she could only use her claws to grab the protrusions on the cliff and slowly climb down to observe the river. Anyway, she wouldn't directly jump into the river to swim. Fortunately, after becoming a zombie, her body was very flexible, and climbing walls and trees was something she often did. She easily climbed down the cliff, and when she was close to the water, Elmar grabbed the rock wall with one hand and touched the water with the other. Then she scooped up a little water and sniffed it, and immediately smelled a very pungent smell. Oh, when Elmar smelled this smell, she immediately shook off the water in her hand, and then climbed up. This river was really strange. The smell of the water became so pungent, and there were no signs of life in the water. But just because of this, they shouldn't all run out of the cave, right? Elmar furrowed her brows in confusion. After she climbed up, she looked left and right for a while. Other than the abnormal river water, there was nothing unusual. Only then did she turn around and start walking out. After exiting the cave, she leaped onto the roof of a building and whistled. Soon, a few figures appeared in front of her. "You guys guard here. I'm going back to the base," Elmar said to the zombies in front of her. Standing in front of Elmar were several level 5 zombie leaders. They nodded to Elmar. Elmar turned around and went to the training ground not far away. She found a car and went back to the base. After returning to the base, she immediately went to Base 1 to find Yuan Tianxing. Yuan Tianxing was reading documents in his office when someone knocked on the door. "Deputy Leader." He looked up and saw Li Zheng standing at the door. "Elmar is back," he said. Then, a 14 or 15-year-old short-haired girl walked in from the door. Seeing her expression, Yuan Tianxing was slightly stunned and asked, "What's wrong? Why are you back at this time? Or did something happen over there?" Looking at the time, it was already 11 o'clock at night. Although Lin Xiao said that he didn't need to worry about the underground creatures for the time being, Yuan Tianxing didn't completely let his guard down. Now that Elmar came back and directly came to find him, he subconsciously guessed that there should be something wrong with those things. But Elmar came back by herself, which meant that the situation over there didn't seem to need her to handle it. It shouldn't be very serious. Elmar walked into his office and sat on the sofa. There is indeed something wrong, but the main reason doesn't seem to be the underground gorillas. Yuan Tianxing slightly tidied up the documents in his hand, then stood up and walked to the sofa beside Elmar's sofa. He asked, "You mean there is a situation, but the problem isn't with those underground creatures? Did something happen?" "Those things suddenly ran out at noon yesterday," said Elmar. "After that night, they didn't go back today. Now they were hunting in another direction. I took the opportunity to go in and investigate. I found that there is an underground river deep in their cave. There is a strange smell in the river. It is very pungent to us, but I don't know if it has any other effects on the living. But I guess the underground gorillas must have smelled the smell in the water and ran out." Yuan Tianxing listened quietly, and then asked, "How do you know there is something wrong with the water? Have you been down there before?" Elmar shook her head. "No, today is my first time down there." Yuan Tianxing thought for a moment and asked, "Could it be that the water was originally like that? It might be strange to you, but it might not have any effect on those underground creatures. Are there any other abnormalities?" Elmar carefully thought about the scene in the cave and shook her head. "No, I just instinctively felt that the river water was abnormal. Apart from that, there is nothing strange in the cave. Those things didn't come to our base. Yuan Tianxing suddenly remembered that the underground guerrillas wanted to attack the base, and asked her worriedly. No, they went in another direction. Don't worry, what the leader said is true. Elmar shook her head as she thought about the large group of underground guerrillas jumping more than 10 meters high in the direction of the zoo. Then she stood up and said, All right, I came back to tell you about this. If there is anything else, I will send someone back to inform you. With that said, she waved at Yuan Tianxing and left without hesitation. Yuan Tianxing frowned as he watched her leave. Although the underground guerrillas didn't come to their base, they were afraid of sunlight and had to come out. It seemed that there was something in the cave that they were afraid of. But from Elmar's words, although they couldn't rule out the possibility that there was something wrong with the water, it could be something else. Just the water could make them feel fear? This doesn't make sense. Or is there something in the water? Or is there a signal of danger? Chapter 1157. Yuan Tianxing thought about it at night, and decided to talk to Lin Feng about it the next day. No matter what, he had to find out the reason for the abnormal behavior of the underground creatures. If there was any danger, he might be able to prepare for it. The next morning, he used the intercom to call Lin Feng. Hello. Why are you calling me so early in the morning? Did something happen? Lin Feng had just sat down when he received the call. He was puzzled. There must be something wrong for him to call so early in the morning. Yuan Tianxing said. Elmar came back last night and said something happened in the cave. I asked her what the reason was, but she didn't explain. Let's talk after you're done with your work. Once Lin Feng heard about the underground cave, he knew that he was referring to the underground creatures. His heart sank when he heard about the situation. But Yuan Tianxing didn't seem to be in a hurry, so it was probably not a big problem. But according to his personality, he would definitely want to find out. Okay, I'll come over after I'm done with my work. He nodded. Yuan Tianxing put down the phone and began to deal with his work. On the other side, Qiu Lily also sensed Elmar's aura last night and then left. She looked in the direction Elmar left in puzzlement. But she didn't leave the base to go to Elmar out of curiosity. Instead, she continued to stay in the second base. Since Elmar went to Yuan Tianxing's place, Yuan Tianxing would naturally take care of it. She didn't have to worry about it. After thinking it through, Qiu Lily went to the Wuxian plantation base to check on the zombie army's discipline. Now that Xie Dong was not around to suppress the zombies were less fearful of Lu Jun, their temporary superior. After all, there were still a large number of level 5 zombies in the base. Even if half of them followed Elmar out of the base, Lin Xiao took more than 10 with him. There were still 30 to 40 level 5 zombie leaders left. So Lu Jun, who was also level 5, didn't pose a threat to them. Only the level 7 Qiu Lily was useful. Fortunately, most of the level 5 zombie leaders had recovered some of their memories. Even if they didn't recover all of their memories, they remembered some common things. So they didn't make things difficult for Lu Jun. At this time, Lu Jun was holding a basket to pick the melons in the melon field. She saw a white shadow flashing in the corner of her eye, and she knew who it was. He turned his head and saw Qiu Lily sitting on a tree next to the wooden hut. She continued to pick her melons until the basket was full. Then she moved it to the cabin. Lu Jun placed the basket in the open space next to him, then looked up in Qiu Lily's direction and said, Ming Ming came back to find Yuan Tianxing last night. Did something happen over there? Qiu Lily shrugged and said, I don't know. I didn't look for her. Maybe. Lu Jun looked at her lazily leaning against the tree and said with a smile, You seem to be very listless these 2 days. Next time, let the leader bring you along. Qiu Lily turned to look at her and pouted. Take me with you. Then Lin Kuei must stay. Forget it. If he can take me out to play, I'll let him stay. Lu Jun turned his head and said with a smile, So it's because of Lin Kuei? You like him that much? She found out that when a girl likes someone, she would express it very clearly, and she was also very clingy. She used to like Lin Xiao, so she used to stick to him. Now she liked Lin Kuei, so she liked to stick to him. It was exactly the same. Yes, I like the hair on his body, It would be great if I could hug him to sleep, but he won't let me hug him for too long. Qiu Lily thought of Lin Kuei's smooth and soft black hair and smiled. Lu Jun smiled and looked up at her. Pfft, why are you sleeping? You're a zombie, right? Can you sleep? She felt that this girl was using her as a pillow. The corners of Qiu Lily's mouth drooped. She looked down at her with dissatisfaction and said, I don't really want to fall asleep. I just want to lie down and hug you. Okay, you just want to use me as a big pillow. I feel like you've fallen in love with the leader. Lu Jun smiled perfunctorily, then went to find an empty basket and prepared to continue picking melons. What do you mean by falling in love with someone else? Qiu Lily was a bit speechless at her description. It was already 11 o'clock in the morning when Lin Feng finished his urgent work and went to find Yuan Tianxing. Lin Feng walked into Yuan Tianxing's office and sat on the sofa. Then he made tea for himself with ample food and clothing. What did Elmar say to you last night when she came back? She made you so worried? He asked while brushing the teapot. After Yuan Tianxing finished the documents in his hand, he stood up and walked out of the office table. He stood by the window and stretched before sitting back on the sofa. He said, She said those things underground have come out at noon the day before yesterday. They came out in broad daylight, and all of them came out. Even if it's raining and there's no sun these days, it's still very abnormal. What? Those gorillas came out? Didn't Lin Xiao say he subdued that big guy? It didn't listen to Lin Xiao's orders? Lin Feng stopped what he was doing and looked at him with a slightly surprised expression. Yuan Tianxing shook his head and said, Although they came out, they didn't have a large area of activity until yesterday. They only started hunting last night, but they didn't hunt in our direction, so we don't have to worry about them for the time being. I'm thinking what made them abandon their own caves and come out. Elmar said she went down to take a look last night. Except for the underground river, there was nothing unusual. Lin Feng understood what he meant, and his expression became slightly solemn. You mean they encountered something that even they are afraid of? So they abandoned their caves and came to the surface? Yuan Tianxing nodded and said, I guess so. Elmar said those things would rather hide in the shadows of the house, or the forest, after coming out than return to their caves. Think about it. These things were not afraid of anything before. Why did they suddenly abandon their nests and escape? Even that level 8 big guy gave up fighting against it? With that said, things were not as simple as they thought. If even that level 8 gorilla couldn't fight against something, what would happen if it came to the surface? Elmar said there's a problem in the underground river. What's the problem? Lin Feng thought for a while and asked. She said the smell of the water is very strange. She instinctively felt that something was wrong. Yuan Tianxing said. Chapter 1158. Lin Feng looked at Yuan Tianxing. Elmar only knew that there was a problem with the underground river, but she didn't know what the problem was. So, what do you plan to do now? Lin Feng asked Yuan Tianxing. I want to take some people down to find out what's going on, and whether it will spread to the surface, Yuan Tianxing said. What? You want to go down? No, it's too dangerous. If monsters like these gorillas appear, you'll probably be eaten. Lin Feng had guessed what Yuan Tianxing was thinking, but he still objected to it. Even if they wanted to go down, it would be safer to let the zombie army go down. Their bodies would be able to take it if anything happened. Compared to the fragile humans, it was much safer. Yuan Tianxing glanced at him. If I don't go, are you going? That's even worse. You still have a wife and child to take care of. Also, who said that there will be danger? Even if there is danger, I have the strength of a level 7 psychic. I can handle it. But, Lin Feng still looked at him in disagreement. Yuan Tianxing waved his hand and poured himself a cup of tea from the teapot that Lin Feng had brewed. Think about it, those gorillas have come out. This is a warning for us. Animals have a strong sense of danger. Maybe they really sensed something was going to happen and came out. If we don't find out what's going on before the situation escalates, what should we do when something unexpected happens? Thinking about the seriousness of the situation, Lin Feng also knew that this potential threat had to be clarified. However, the people who went down couldn't be too weak. He was afraid that if they were weak, they wouldn't be able to handle the situation, and wouldn't be able to send the information back. If he let the zombie army go down, he was afraid that they might miss out on key clues due to their different physiques and senses. Therefore, although it was dangerous for Yuan Tianqing to go down, it was the most suitable. After all, he was a special forces soldier and was more professional in field exploration. Then bring more people down. Ask Elmar for a few more leaders to follow. Seeing that Yuan Tianqing had made up his mind, Lin Feng could only sigh. Don't be so worried. You and Lin Xiao are still in the base. If I find anything down there, I'll bring it up alive. If it really doesn't work, I can still turn into a zombie and ask Lin Xiao to come back and save me. Besides, I'm single and I don't have a family or children. It's more suitable for me to go. Yuan Tianqing took a sip of hot tea and smiled. Lin Feng glared at him in dissatisfaction. What are you talking about? The entire base is your home, okay? You don't have any relatives, but don't forget that you still have friends like us. If something happens to you, my sister will be heartbroken when she comes back. Lin Feng could only mutter the last sentence in his heart. Oh, that's right. See, for the sake of friends like you, nothing will happen to me. Yuan Tianqing nodded at him with a smile. Other than Elmar's people, you should also bring Li Zheng and the others with you. If something really happens to you, they'll take care of it for you. Even if that doesn't work, we have to get them to bring us the news, Lin Feng said. Alright, I got it. You're thinking too much. Maybe it hasn't reached that stage yet. Yuan Tianqing waved his hand at him in annoyance. What if you don't find anything when you go down? If those gorillas return to the cave, won't you be finished? Lin Feng frowned and raised another question. Yuan Tianqing crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the back of the chair. He thought for a while and said, I don't think so. If they can return to the cave so quickly, there's actually no need to run out of the cave. Their senses are much stronger than ours. That better be the case. In any case, tell Elmar to keep a close eye on those things. If they have any intention of coming back, immediately inform you to come out of the cave. Lin Feng nodded, agreeing with his point. After the two of them finished discussing, Yuan Tianqing threw other matters to Lin Feng. He left the base with Li Zheng and the others in the afternoon, and went to Elmar's training base. Elmar sensed their aura from afar, and waited at the entrance. Do you have any plans or arrangements for coming here today? She had just gone back to tell Yuan Tianqing about the situation here last night, and he was already here today. This meant that he was definitely here, because of what she had said last night. Yes, I'm preparing to go down and search carefully. You should also prepare to send some, people to me. 1 level 6, 10 level 5. Is that okay? Yuan Tianqing asked her after getting off the car. What? You want to go down too? I have no problem with the people you mention. But are you sure? With your status, if something happens, it's easy to die. Elmar said with some hesitation. We have to go down. How can we catch tiger cubs without entering the tiger's den? If we don't go down, how do we know if we will be safe? This place is too close to our base, Yuan Tianqing said as he looked back at the base. The cave entrance was only a few dozen kilometers away from the base. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Their base was the only survivor base within a 100-kilometer radius. Are you going down now? Elmar asked Yuan Tianqing. Yuan Tianqing asked her about the current movements of the underground gorillas. What's the status of the underground gorillas? Is it possible for them to come back? Elmar subconsciously looked in the direction of the underground gorillas and shook her head. Nope. Since they left last night, they have been going in that direction. At dawn today, they found a dark place to stop temporarily. Now they were more than 10 kilometers away from here. Why don't you go down tonight and see where they are going? If they continue to go and don't come back tonight, it means they won't suddenly come back and cause an unexpected situation. Yuan Tianqing thought about it and looked back at the others. For safety's sake, Elmar's suggestion wasn't bad. Okay, then we'll go down tonight after we see where they are. He nodded in agreement. Then come in first. I'll prepare some people for you. You guys find a place to rest. Elmar saw that he agreed, and immediately turned around to arrange some people for him. Elmar's training base was directly set up with military tents, and there were many soldiers in military uniforms guarding the surroundings. Because this was the camp of the zombie army, they didn't wear sunglasses to disguise themselves. Therefore, when Yuan Tianqing and the others came in, although there were many people, they didn't feel human at all. Also, every soldier had a pair of strange black eyes without the scara. Chapter 1159. After Li Zheng and the others followed Yuan Tianqing in, they all knew what this place was and knew that these people in military uniforms were zombies. Other than Feng Mingyu, the others were still calm. Feng Mingyu shrunk behind the tall Lei Yao and carefully followed them in. Do you need to be like this? Don't you feel embarrassed? What are you afraid of? They are our comrades now. They won't rush out and pounce on you. Look at how scared you are. Lin Yu said to him, as if he couldn't stand it anymore. Shh. Lower your voice. What if they hear you and get angry? Feng Mingyu immediately turned his head and raised his finger at him to shut him up. He was afraid. There was no other way. Actually, he wasn't afraid of anything else but their eyes. The eyes of the zombies were overflowing with black, like two black holes, as if they were going to suck people in. And after being sucked in, he didn't know what was inside, as if he would be drowned and suffocated to death. Anyway, he was afraid of those eyes. When he watched the apocalyptic movies, he didn't even dare to look at the eyes of the zombies in the movies. He didn't expect the real world to be even scarier. After watching for so many years, he still hadn't gotten used to it. I'm really speechless. Other people are afraid of zombies because they are afraid that they will attack and eat humans. Now many of these people here had recovered their human memories and some of their humanity. Is there a need to be so afraid? Speaking of which, our leader is really amazing. He can even help them recover their memories. Lin Yu said and suddenly began to worship his leader again. Feng Mingyu moved closer to him and carefully looked at the zombie soldiers passing by. He whispered, "That's true, but I can't do anything even if I'm afraid. I don't care if it's embarrassing or not. I can't control myself anymore. Let's go. Just as he was about to push Lin Yu forward, he suddenly felt his collar being pulled by someone, and then a force pulled him back. Who? Feng Mingyu's collar was suddenly pulled by someone from behind. She immediately screamed out of reflex and turned her head. He saw a white-haired old man with a pair of black eyes and a pair of golden eyes smiling as he pulled his collar. "Brat, you two are speaking so loudly. We all heard you." Old man Guo's wrinkled face is smiling at the two of them with his eyes narrowed into slits. When Feng Mingyu saw this pair of eyes, she was shocked. She screamed and jumped onto Lin Yu. She hugged him like a koala and shouted, "Aha!" Countless soldiers passing by or standing guard immediately turned their heads in unison, staring at him with a pair of zombie black eyes. Lin Yu, who was being hugged like a pillar, Yuan Tianqing and Li Zheng, who were walking in front, were also shocked by his high-pitched scream. They turned around and were speechless. Then he said, "Old Mr. Guo, I'll leave them to you to train." With that, he turned around and left. Feng Mingyu was in disbelief as she watched Yuan Tianqing leave. "Boss, help. It was too cruel. Why did they have to hand him over to an old zombie?" Lin Yu turns around speechlessly and lowers his head to Master Guo politely. "Sorry, old sir. I was rude just now." Old man Guo smiles at him. You're very calm. This brat is very interesting. Come on, Grandpa will take you out to train your courage. How can you be so timid? You've been in the apocalypse for so many years. How can you be afraid of zombies?" Feng Mingyu wants to cry, but he doesn't dare to look at his eyes. He can only continue to hug Lin Yu and look up and down. This, I can't do anything about it." Lin Yu raised his hand and grabbed his hand, trying to pull him away. He viciously roars at him. "All right, let go of me. You're so heavy. Why are you clinging to me? You're so ugly, get off me. Bro, don't go. What if I have a heart attack if you leave?" Feng Mingyu put down his leg after hearing what he said. But he doesn't let go, still clinging to him. Lin Yu suddenly regrets talking to this brat. Li Zheng turned around and glanced behind him. One was holding onto his collar and refusing to let go. One was clinging onto him and refusing to let go. And the other was desperately trying to push him away like a piece of sticky candy. It's funny and embarrassing. Old man Guo puts his face in front of Feng Mingyu and looks at him with big eyes. Are you scared? Very scared? Feng Mingyu sees his face coming over. He immediately turns his face away and closes his eyes, not daring to look at him. He says, sorry old sir. I. Lin Yu struggles for a while and finds that he can't pull this bastard off. He can only stand there and roll his eyes, then says to the old man, Old sir, it's our fault. Please be magnanimous and don't argue with us. This brat may be sick in his heart and has given up treatment. If you scare him like this, he will really faint later. Old man Guo glances at Lin Yu and then loosens Feng Mingyu's collar. Then, Feng Mingyu immediately leaped out of Lin Yu's body and disappeared outside the military camp's gate in a flash, leaving old man Guo and Lin Yu quietly looking at each other. When the sky turned dark, Yuan Tianxing immediately looked out of the window. He is waiting for the signal from El March. Sure enough, Elmar appears not long after. They didn't come back, they continue to move forward. According to last night's itinerary, they will walk another 10 kilometers today. In 10 days, they will reach the range of the rat nest in the zoo. I really hope that's where they are going. Elmar comes in and says to him. Yuan Tianxing hears this and nods. Since they didn't come back, then let's go down now. Let's move. After seeing the people sent by Elmar, Yuan Tianxing slightly turns his head to look at El March. He seems to be asking why she also sent this old man down. Why are you looking at her? I want to go down myself, I want to see something new. Old man Guo stands next to him, one hand behind his back, the other hand stroking his beard. He says with a smile. Everyone looks at him speechlessly. Does this old man want to go down and play? His personality is really like a child's. Even if you look serious, you can't hide the fact that there is a naughty kid living in your heart. Yuan Tianxing looks at Elmar again. Elmar shrugs and says, let the old man go down with you. And these are all level 5 earth and metal element leaders. If something happens underground, it will be easier to deal with it. Okay, thank you. Yuan Tianxing nods to her, then turns around and gets in the car. An off-road vehicle and a small military truck carry 20 to 30 people and zombies out. They set off towards the entrance of the underground cave. Chapter 1160. When they were near the entrance, Yuan Tianxing and the others got off the car and walked to the edge of the cave. The cave was more than 10 meters wide. Using the flashlight, they could see that the sloping ground led to the bottom. It was dark down there. Yuan Tianxing and the others hung gas masks on their waists and then walked down fully armed. The gas mask was to prevent the possibility of poisonous gas in the underground cave. Everyone looked left and right and walked down cautiously. The light from the flashlight shone into the cave, and they walked forward while looking at their surroundings. Old man Guo walked at the back, and he followed behind the others. He used his hands to touch the walls of the cave, and his eyes carefully observed the surroundings. Yuan Tianxing also looked carefully at the surrounding walls, ceiling, and ground. He found that the walls and ceiling of the cave were very rough, and there were even a lot of claw marks. Only the ground was relatively smooth, maybe because the creatures had walked on it. After walking for more than half an hour, Yuan Tianxing looked at the simple map that Elmar had drawn for him. Soon they entered the big arched hole on the map, and there were many holes around. Elmar had told Yuan Tianxing about the situation in the cave before he came down, and told them to go to the biggest hole, so they wouldn't get lost so easily. The cave was so quiet that no sound could be heard. Apart from their own footsteps and talking, there was no other sound. Damn, these gorillas can really dig holes. Are they mice? Or rabbits? They don't look like them. Why do they look like gorillas? Lin Yu stood in the huge round hole, and looked at the 7 or 8 holes around him, and said in surprise, their claws can even cut through metal easily, so digging holes is not a problem at all. But living underground for a long time without seeing light, no wonder their eyes have degenerated. I heard that they had eyes on their faces when they were brought back for experiments, but they were covered by their eyelids. Li Zheng took the flashlight and shone around. Then he asked Yuan Tianxing, which way? Yuan Tianxing pointed to the biggest hole. Here. Everyone continued to walk into the cave. Feng Mingyu stuck close to Lin Yu with a vigilant face. His attention was not on the strange cave, but on the other zombies that came down with him. Although he told himself not to look at them, he couldn't help but look at their movements from the corner of his eyes. Especially the old man who scared him before. At this time, Lin Xiao had collected a lot of energy cores from level 6 and 7 mutant beasts and plants. She had also caught a few level 6 zombies, and was now chasing a level 7 zombie. She killed the ones with too much blood, and only caught the ones with less blood. As for this level 7 sandstorm zombie king, Lin Xiao planned to kill it. Because of his blood and hostility, the smell of his body was so strong that it could be smelled from hundreds of meters away. I can guarantee that the leader wants to kill him, because he stinks. Yin Xiao, who was in the same group as Jing Yan, said as she watched Tornado San fight with Lin Xiao from afar. She said that she had been sent to the side to watch the fight. After all, the opponent was a level 7 adept. 5th and 6th level adepts like them wouldn't be able to do anything. This level 2 king's ability was sand. He could turn mud into quicksand, and he could even create sand tornadoes that connected to the sky. Jing Yan stood on a rock at the side and watched as Lin Xiao waved his hand. A huge black flame transformed into a huge black dragon and charged towards the yellow sand tornado. Bang! It was directly smashed into pieces, and sand and dust immediately scattered all over the sky. This level 2 zombie probably eats a lot of humans. The smell of blood is too strong. Jing Yan lifted her head slightly, her face expressionless as she watched the dust fly. If it's a human, then it must be from Sunfire. These two bases were the closest to each other in the northwest. I'm guessing it used to be around Sunfire or Hidden Cloud City. It must have been attracted by the level 9 adept cores in Green Mountain Base. Jing Yan said. Lin Xiao covered his mouth and nose and quickly flashed into the space. Only then was he able to avoid being blown up by the sandstorm caused by the sandstorm. She squinted at the level 2 king's movements, and saw that it was trying to escape. However, it was blocked by Yi Qingxian, OL6 and MO. Although the three of them blocked its way, they couldn't do anything to it. The level 2 zombie quickly broke the green vines that Yi Qingxian had released, and used a large amount of sand to wrap around Yi Qingxian's vines. The earth wall that Old Six had set up was easily crushed by the sand cones formed by the opponent. Mo's body flashed, and he shot several metal spears at the level 2 king. Fortunately, this was a small town, and there were many metal and mechanical objects that she could use. However, the level 7 zombie dodged Mo's spear with just a flash of its body. Lin Xiao disappeared from the dimension and flew towards the level 7 zombie. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of it and reached out to grab its neck. The level 7 zombie's face was hideous, and the flesh on its lips had all fallen off, revealing 2 rows of gums. Its teeth were covered in reddish-brown blood, but they still shone with a cold light. The corners of its mouth were split open to the edges of its face. Its nose had been cut in half, and its eyes were black like a ghost's. Lin Xiao extended his hand and accurately grabbed his neck. Then, he revealed himself and quickly inserted his other hand into the second-grade king's skull. Then with a push of his hand he sliced off his skull. Roar! The level 2 king screamed, and then lost all resistance. The top of its skull was cut off by Lin Xiao, and it couldn't be more dead. Lin Xiao dug out the core, and then took out a cup of water to soak it in, and then washed it. Alright, it's about time to find them. Lin Xiao threw the core into the dimension, and then poured the water out of the cup. Yi Qingxian and the others flashed to her side, and Lin Xiao took them to the road and threw out the car. They drove towards the direction of the cliff, and on the way, they could directly go to Qingshan Base. When they reached the intersection at the bottom of the cliff, Lin Xiao jumped on top of the car and roared towards the mountain. The big black panther, who was lying on the tree with its eyes closed, suddenly opened its eyes, and then stood up and jumped down. Let's go, the leader and the others are at the bottom of the mountain. Duan Wan and Shui Mingjun, who were not far from the tree, turned their heads and looked at him. They immediately packed their things and prepared to leave. Chapter 1161. When the three of them were ready, they turned around and saw that Yen Huiguang had already disappeared. His aura was heading in Lin Xiao's direction. There was a highway under the mountain range where the cliff was located, but it was more than 10 kilometers away from the cliff. However, the highway was covered with sand and dust, and there were some abandoned zombie cars on the side of the road. Lin Xiao and the others parked the car on the side, waiting for Duan Wan and the others to come over. At the same time, they sensed the direction of Xikong Chen's aura to see if he was still hiding nearby. After a while, several ear-piercing sounds could be heard. Lin Xiao turned his head and saw Yin Huiguang appear in front of him. After a while, Lin Kuei, Shui Mingjun, and the other two arrived. Let's go to Qingshan Base and see what it looks like. Lin Xiao asked them to get in the car and continued to drive in the direction of Qingshan Base. There was no need for a guide. Lin Xiao just needed to follow the aura of Blue Land. In her space, there were a few level 6 zombies thrown on the grassland where the sheep were grazing, looking around in confusion. When they saw each other, they bared their teeth like wild beasts, warning each other not to come close. They were all attracted by the energy core of a level 9 metahuman. They had seen the state of a metahuman when they went crazy, and they knew what would happen to them. If they continued to go crazy, they would enter a particularly weak state when their energy was almost exhausted. So they came with the mentality of picking up scraps. If they could snatch this level 9 energy core, it would be a big profit. However, they did not expect the competition to be so fierce, and the opponents to be so strong. Not to mention the number of level 7 mutant beasts, zombies, and metahumans. There were even a lot of level 8 metahumans. And there was also the existence of a level 8 zombie emperor. Because of Lin Xiao's existence, the zombie emperor's aura was too terrifying. So these zombies finally retreated far away and did not go forward. In the end, they did not expect that the zombie emperor would come after them. They could not escape even if they wanted to. And they could not hide even if they wanted to. If they wanted to fight, forget it. Under the powerful aura of 2 levels higher, the level 6 zombies who had evolved a lot of intelligence were terrified. Then they were taken away obediently. After being brought into this space, they felt that they were completely suppressed. They each kept a safe distance and looked around anxiously, as well as the lake that made them feel oppressed. At this time, more than a dozen level 1 or 2 gorillas were lying together in the space forest, sleeping soundly. They had been starving for many days. Although they could smell the scent of food outside the forest, they couldn't find the way out of the forest. They could only wander around aimlessly. They could not even chew the trees here. They climbed up to pick leaves, but they found that the leaves were not good. They could only crawl on the trees to eat, and they found that the leaves were not good. Roar! A tiger's roar came from the back of the building, and a half-grown tiger cub jumped out with a piece of wet meat in its mouth. It dragged the meat into the grass nearby and began to eat it. In one of the small spaces behind the building, Lin Xiao had placed buckets filled with bear and wolf meat. At this moment, the lid of one of the buckets had been opened, revealing the water and meat inside. However, the water in the bucket seemed to have been drunk, and there was a lot less meat. While eating the bear meat, it looked at the herd of mutant sheep and roe deer across the lake. It found that there were more newborn sheep and roe deer. When it was injured and recuperating here, there were always people who gave it food. But recently, it didn't know why the previous keepers were all gone. It felt that there were fewer breaths in this space. Looking at the new human breaths, the little tiger stuck out its tongue and licked its mouth. Then it buried its head in the meat. While eating, it looked up at the sky. Author, did you forget about me? You only let me out now. You always let those 3 out to play, but not me. Come out. I want to play too. Lin Xiao seemed to feel the resentment coming from the space and smiled. In fact, she had sent people to take care of this little guy. Lu Tianyi had been taking care of it before. But now that Lu Tianyi was not in the space, she let the others out. It seemed that this little guy was lonely. But Lin Xiao didn't plan to let it out now. He would wait until they reached Qingshan Base. After driving for 3 hours, they finally reached Qingshan Base. It was located in a remote town in the territory. No wonder no one knew about their base for so long. It's in this place. Looking around, there were some less hills. It was desolate and uninhabited. There were also many zombies moving around. Just as Lin Xiao and the others were about to arrive, Hu Daba anxiously ran to Lan Lu and yelled at him. Lan Lu was confused by his sudden shout. He turned to Chang Qingqing and asked her, "What did Daba say?" Chang Qingqing said, "He said that a very powerful zombie is coming towards us, and its level is much higher than him." Hu Daba nodded vigorously. Lan Lu thought for a moment, his eyes flashed and asked him, "Then do you see if there are many more high-level zombies around her? Maybe the female leader of the base is coming." Hearing this, Hu Daba was stunned. "Roar!" Lan Lu looked at Chang Qingqing. Chang Qingqing helped him translate. He said that it's a level 8 zombie emperor. "Oh right. That female leader is indeed at level 8. She said the last sentence to Hu Daba. Hu Daba looked at Chang Qingqing with a surprised expression. He didn't expect that female zombie to level up so quickly. He turned around and walked out. But after a while, he ran back in hurriedly. "Roar?" Chang Qingqing was stunned when she heard his roar, then turned to look at Lan Lu. She asked, "Is there another zombie emperor with that female zombie?" Lan Lu was also stunned, then said with a blank expression, "No. The zombies that appeared with her were all level 5 or 6. There wasn't even a level 7. Where did the other zombie emperor come from?" Hu Daba roared at him again. "Roar!" Chang Qingqing looked at Lan Lu and said, "He said he sensed the aura of 2 zombie emperors, and they are coming this way." Lan Lu stood up and walked to the window, then carefully sensed outside and said, "Why do I only feel the energy of a zombie emperor? This is Miss Lu, I don't feel the other one." Hu Daba roared at him with a straight face. "Roar!" Chang Qingqing continued to translate. He said that he sensed it with the energy of the same kind, so that the range is larger. Hu Daba was only level 6. If he sensed the energy of the same kind, the range would be much smaller. But if he sensed the energy of the same kind, he could sense it further. Chapter 1162. When he heard Lan Lu say that he only saw one level 8 zombie, Hu Daba became nervous. Then who was the other one? Are you saying that the 2 level 8 zombie emperors came together? Lan Lu frowned and asked Hu Daba. Hu Daba nodded. Lan Lu rubbed his chin and pondered. He only sensed the aura of the female zombie leader, but he didn't feel the aura of the other zombie emperor. However, Hu Daba wouldn't lie to him. Since what he said was true, then who was the other zombie emperor? Could it be that there were other zombie emperors around the female zombie that they didn't know about? If that's the case, then this woman isn't simple. Who would dare to provoke a base with 2 zombie emperors? Even China would have to think twice before doing so. But we didn't feel the aura of the other zombie emperor. Wait a minute. Chang Qingqing was about to say something, but her expression suddenly changed. She and Lan Lu looked at each other. A powerful aura suddenly appeared and began to spread. Lan Lu frowned. "This zombie emperor's aura. I know it." As soon as he said this, Chang Qingqing and Hu Daba immediately stared at him. They were waiting for him to say who it was. "That's right, it's the lightning-type zombie emperor that attacked China last time." Lan Lu looked at the two of them and replied, "That lightning zombie?" Chang Qingqing didn't react. Lan Lu suddenly thought of something and said, "Ah, did he suddenly disappear last time? So it was this female zombie who secretly brought it into the space." Chang Qingqing asked doubtfully, "Did she save the zombie emperor? Didn't you say that there was something wrong with the zombie emperor at that time?" Lan Lu nodded, "Yes." Chang Qingqing lowered her head and thought for a moment before saying, "So that's how it is. No wonder his aura isn't that strong. Right? Why did Miss Lu come here? She wouldn't be looking for your level 8 energy core so soon, right?" Lan Lu, "It shouldn't be." Chang Qingqing shrugged and said, "Is it possible that she just came to say hello or drink some tea?" Lan Lu, "You'll know when you get there." At this time, Lin Xiao parked the car a few kilometers away from the Qingshan base. He first went into the space to bring out the tiger. She stood in front of the small building and looked at the little tiger that was hiding behind the small building. It stuck its big round head out from behind the wall and looked at her with its face tilted. He waved at it. "Come on. Didn't you want me to take you out to play? But you've already grown up. You should go out and learn how to hunt. Go out and let that stupid dog take you for a walk." Roar, roar. Actually, the tiger was already a year old, but its body was not very big. It cautiously barked at Lin Xiao twice. The people outside the space didn't know why Lin Xiao suddenly stopped and ran into the space. In any case, they were almost at the Qingshan base. Why didn't they just go over? But since she had stopped, something must have happened. Not long after, the zombies felt the aura of another zombie emperor and immediately understood what was going on. It seemed that Lin Xiao was waiting for him. Lin Xiao was playing with the little tiger in the space. Are you coming over? If you don't come over, I'll leave. Don't you want to go out to play? Woo woo, the little tiger bared its teeth at her and turned its head away. It didn't want to go out now. Lin Xiao was speechless as she looked at the big cat's arrogant face. Then she walked over helplessly. Okay, it's my fault that I didn't have time to accompany you, okay? Come over. When she saved this guy, it was still a small ball. Now it was as big as a medium-sized dog. Thinking about it, it had been a year. But you're already a year old. Why are you growing so slowly? Other people's bodies would grow several times longer after mutation. Why did it shrink when it came to yours? Your parents weren't small at that time. Lin Xiao looked at it carefully and murmured in surprise. The little tiger obviously didn't understand what she said, but it could understand Lin Xiao's eyes. Was she looking down on it? Feeling that Lin Xiao was looking down on it, the little tiger immediately became angry. It jumped out from behind the wall and roared fiercely at Lin Xiao. It wasn't afraid of Lin Xiao coming closer. Hey, why are you so fierce? You can't beat me. Lin Xiao walked over and waved her hand in front of the little tiger's eyes. Just as the beast was about to bite her, she grabbed its waist and hugged it. Woo! The little tiger immediately struggled and wanted to get down from Lin Xiao's body. But Lin Xiao hugged it and flashed out of the space. Ow ow ow! A tiger roared, and all the zombies turned to look. Hey, the leader finally let this little guy out. Xiadong saw the little thing and immediately came over. He reached out to touch the tiger's head. Ow! The little tiger immediately turned its head angrily and bit his hand. Hey, it's quite fierce. Xiadong quickly pulled his hand back. Lin Xiao looked around and said, That guy hasn't arrived yet? Everyone looked at each other and shrugged. He shrugged and said, It looks like he doesn't plan to go with us. After waiting for a while, the aura didn't come closer. The other party probably didn't want to go with them. Lin Xiao threw the little tiger in her arms and said, Since he doesn't want to come, then forget it. Wang, come here. As she spoke, she suddenly raised her head and called out to her buttface. Woof! A big black dog leaped out from the roof of a nearby house and stood there, looking down at Lin Xiao. But the next second, it immediately looked at the orange cat next to her. Wang became excited when it saw the little tiger. It jumped down and rushed in front of the little tiger. As a result, the little tiger was so scared that all its fur stood up, and it bared its teeth and growled. Wang couldn't hide its aura at this moment. The level 6 zombie dog's aura made the little tiger nervous, and it subconsciously roared at it. But Wang didn't care at all. It excitedly swung its tail and ran around the little tiger. Take it away and play with it. But remember to take care of its safety. Lin Xiao saw Wang's inexplicable excitement, so he kicked its butt and said to him. At this time, there was a big snake hanging down from the roof of another house. The snake opened its eyes and looked at the little tiger. It stuck out its tongue twice and then retracted its tongue. Woof! Wang immediately turned its head and barked happily at Lin Xiao. Then it turned its head and bit the soft skin on the back of the little tiger's neck and carried it away. Roar! The little tiger let out a reluctant roar when it was picked up by the little tiger. But its body was very obedient. It curled up into a ball with its tail between its legs and was carried away by Wang. Chapter 1163. When Lin Xiao and the others arrived at the entrance of Qingshan base, they saw that there was already someone waiting there. The person waiting for them was none other than Lan Lu himself. Lan Lu's eyes flashed when he saw Lin Kuei, Yan Huiguang, and the others behind Lin Xiao. He took another look at Yan Huiguang. He appeared with this female zombie. It seemed that she had really solved the problem of the information being leaked. He smiled and welcomed Lin Xiao. I didn't think that you would come here. Why didn't you say anything before coming? I thought you would leave after taking care of the Black Wolf King. Lin Xiao knew that he was just being polite. She smiled and said, "This is your territory. I would have come to say hello if I wanted to leave. Besides, are you saying that you don't welcome me?" When Lan Lu heard the last sentence, he knew that she was joking. He waved his hand and led them inside. "How is that possible? It's just that the conditions here are a bit crude. I was afraid that you wouldn't like it. But since you're here, please come in. If you knew that I was here to collect debts, I don't know if you would still welcome me. When will you give me my level 8 energy core?" Lin Xiao said with a smile as she led them inside. When they approached the gate of their base, Lin Xiao and the others' expressions were a bit strange. "I say, since you guys have built a base here, at least get rid of the words mental hospital." After seeing the words Qingshan Mental Hospital, Lin Xiao was speechless as she complained to Lan Lu. The people who followed Lin Xiao and looked at Lan Lu, and the others with a look of agreement. After hearing what she said, Lan Lu looked at the words and coughed awkwardly. He coughed awkwardly and explained, "Ahem. That. Because we were planning to find another place to build a base. We didn't plan on staying here for long. That's why we didn't take it to heart. It's just that we didn't find a suitable place, so we forgot about it, and didn't care about it later." Lin Xiao looked at him with a strange expression. "I always felt that we came to a place that we shouldn't have come to. You happen to be a psychic. Speaking of which, were you a patient here before?" Lan Lu looked at her with a choked expression. Seeing his expression, Lin Xiao smiled. "Oh, looks like I was right." Lan Lu was speechless. He would never tell her that most of the people who awakened their abilities were patients. After entering the Qingshan base, Lan Lu invited them to sit down in the reception room. "Speak. Since he transferred the money to us, he's definitely not here to collect on his debt. Is there anything related to our base?" After sitting down, Lan Lu smiled at Lin Xiao and asked. Of course, he did not believe what Lin Xiao had just said. After all, he was a spiritual type. Since this female zombie came here, there must be something. And if you head northwest from here, it's about 200 kilometers away from here, close to the border. Something has appeared over there. It's best if you send someone over to keep an eye on it, but don't get too close. These monsters crawled out from the depths of the earth, and their bodies carried a very strong corrosive acid gas. The area they appeared in was about 10 kilometers wide. The vegetation had withered, and the ground was pitch black. It had now become a dead zone. Those things eat corroded corpses, zombies too. Lin Xiao's expression became serious as she said to Lan Lu. Hearing her say this, Lan Lu felt that the situation was indeed very serious. It didn't seem like she was joking. His heart sank. Monster? What kind of monster? Lin Xiao thought of the eyes and felt a chill on the back of her neck. She said, "And it's a monster that's 2 to 3 meters long. Its head is round and the size of a water basin. But there are many eyes on its head. It only has 2 feet like front claws. The body on the back is flat and soft like a leech or a slug. Anyway, it looks very disgusting." When everyone heard her description, a round head full of eyes, and a flat and soft body on the back, they all felt uncomfortable. After thinking about it, they all felt bad. Why would such a thing suddenly appear? Lan Lu looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao thought about it and said, "I think there might be a world that we don't know about in the depths of the earth. Apart from the monsters we saw on your side, there was also a strange creature that appeared not too long ago. They don't have eyes, but they look very similar to gorillas. But they are much bigger than the ones we saw on your side. And those things are very aggressive. Fortunately, they still have a weakness. But for the monsters on your side, I'll leave it to you to find their weakness. I'm a little worried about the situation of the monsters on my side. Will there be any strange changes?" Before she saw those multi-eyed monsters, she had a bad feeling in her heart. After seeing those multi-eyed monsters, she began to worry about whether the situation of De Zhuang and the others had also changed. What she meant was to tell Lan Lu that she wouldn't be staying here any longer. There are even monsters on your side. Do you think they have something in common? Is there a connection? Lan Lu asked her after thinking for a while. If there's something in common, It's probably that they are all creatures that have never been seen in the world, and that they came from underground. There's nothing else. Lin Xiao thought about it and replied. Hearing her say this, Lan Lu said, All right, I'll send someone to observe the situation. Now that there's 1 and 2, I'm wondering if there will be such unknown creatures in other areas. Why would these things suddenly appear? If that's the case, I can't help but feel that there's a threat coming from underground. His senses had always been very sharp, and after hearing Lin Xiao say that there was more than one type of unknown creature, he felt a little uneasy. Lin Xiao looked at him and nodded in agreement. I feel the same way. I think we need to find out if any of the other bases have discovered this. After discussing this matter with Lan Lu, Lin Xiao didn't stay in Qingshan base for long. Very quickly, he brought his people out of the mental hospital. Wang and the others, who were playing outside the base with the tiger cub, sensed Lin Xiao's aura, and left the Qingshan base where there were many human auras. After leaving the base, they immediately chased after Lin Xiao. The tiger cub didn't look like it had grown up, but its aura wasn't weak. At least level 3 mutant beasts and zombies weren't a threat to it anymore, unless it met level 4 or above. When Lin Xiao saw them on the road not far from Qingshan base, he saw the tiger cub lying on Mushroom's head and laughed. What's wrong with you guys? Or did the two of you get despised by the kitten? Lin Xiao looked at Mushroom, who had half a tiger on its head, and then looked at the other two. Dahe glanced coldly at Lin Xiao, then walked away. Only Wang barked a few times at the tiger cub lying on Mushroom's head. The tiger cub calmly opened its mouth and called out. Chapter 1164. Lin Xiao and the others were driving on the road. From time to time, there would be a huge black snake slithering through the forest, and from time to time, a big black dog jumping from left to right of the road. Behind the caravan, there was a huge mushroom that was more than a meter tall, with a tiger on its head. Below it, there were a few legs made of roots that were swinging as it chased after them. It seemed to be running very happily. Shui Mingjun looked at the big mushroom behind them, and said with a curious face, Your leader really accepts all kinds of pets. It seems that zombies are normal for her. Yi Qingxian, who was at the side, also stuck her head out to look behind, and nodded in agreement. Yes, the weirdest thing is this big mushroom. It's so smart. By the way, why does the tiger like this big mushroom? It doesn't want to come down. The highway they were on was a highway, so the speed of the car was more than 123. But this speed was still very slow for those level 6 mutant animals and plants. On the way, Lin Xiao didn't stop to hunt other mutant beasts and mutant plants. He didn't stop when he passed by the city either. He kept going back to Huadong at high speed. It was close to midnight, and at this time, Yuan Tianqing and the others had already been in the cave for a few hours. They walked around the empty cave for a few hours before they found the river that Elmar mentioned. They shone the flashlight into the water, and it was really dark. Yuan Tianqing sniffed and didn't smell anything. He looked at the others and asked, Do you guys smell anything in the water? Li Zhang and the others shook their heads. Only the old man and the other zombies stared at the river thoughtfully. Yuan Tianqing saw them like this, and knew that they felt something strange. So he went to the old man and asked, Did you find anything? Old Guo was a metal type, so he didn't have much sensitivity to the energy in the water. But his nose smelled a strange smell. He said, I don't feel anything from the energy in the water, but this smell is a bit abnormal. At least I haven't smelled this on land, and it's very pungent. What, you don't smell it? After saying that, he looked at Yuan Tianqing with doubt. Yuan Tianqing shook his head and looked at the others. What about you guys? Li Zhang and the other humans sniffed seriously, and then shook their heads in unison. I don't smell anything. Maybe it's because our noses are more sensitive. Lu Feng, you have the special ability of water. Did you feel anything? He turned to look at a level 5 zombie next to him and asked. Lu Feng was the only zombie with water ability. He was a fat middle-aged man, and he was also one of the level 5 zombies who had awakened their memories. He heard Old Mengua's name being called. He immediately stretched out his hand and carefully sensed the river for a while before roaring at the old man. Geezer Gua frowned and asked, "Are you sure?" Lu Fang nodded. Only then did Old Man Gua turn his head to explain to Yuan Tianxing. He said that there's a bad substance in the water, and advised everyone not to touch it. As for what substance was in the water, and how it would react if he touched it, he couldn't tell. He just felt that it was dangerous. But I believe that if even we feel that it's dangerous, then it's even more dangerous for you. Are there any living creatures in the river? Yuan Tianxing suddenly looked at Lu Fang and asked. Lu Fang shook his head, indicating that he didn't feel any signs of living creatures in the water. Yuan Tianxing nodded and turned to the others. If that's the case, then let's take some water back and let someone study it. Lu Fang, you have the special ability of water. You can control the water and put it in a container to see if it can be put back. When he said it could be put back, he actually meant that he wasn't sure what substance was in the water. He also didn't know if the isolation bottle they brought would lose its effect. After all, there were no living creatures in the water. Maybe an ordinary container wouldn't be able to contain it. Lu Fang nodded. Lei Yao took out an isolation bottle from his equipment bag, unscrewed the cap, and put it on the ground. Then he stepped aside. Lu Fang raised his hand and hooked it in the river. A fist-sized water droplet came out of the river and rose into the air. Then Lu Fang pointed at the bottle on the ground. The water droplet floated over and leaned against the bottle. Then it turned into a long rope of water and entered the bottle. After seeing the black water enter the transparent bottle, the others quietly waited for the bottle to change. They didn't rush up to take the bottle. Zi-ka! A slight sound came from the bottle, and then everyone saw that cracks began to appear on the bottle. Pa! Kacha! Bang! Hua! In less than 3 seconds, the entire bottle exploded. The glass bottle exploded into pieces. Everyone subconsciously took 2 steps back. Then, they looked at each other with a serious expression. The bottle exploded and the water inside spilled all over the ground. Everyone instinctively avoided being near the water. Seems like the problem isn't small. Yuan Tianxing looked like he expected it. He sighed and turned to look at the river. Old Gua took out a dagger and threw it in the air. He raised his hand and controlled it to put it into the river. After a while, his hand moved slightly and then loosened. His expression also darkened. He raised his hand and started to stroke his beard. Yuan Tianxing noticed his strangeness and turned to look at him. What's wrong? Old Gua's hand paused and then continued to stroke his beard. His eyes were still staring at the river below. He said, After I put the dagger down, my energy control was cut off, and I can't feel the dagger after I put it in the water. I don't know what's going on in the water. Yuan Tianxing squatted at the edge of the cliff and looked at the river. He was puzzled. But the water won't come up by itself. Why did the gorillas run out of the cave in fear? It shouldn't be, as long as they don't go near the river. What he said did make some sense, and everyone felt that it was very strange. Was it not the water that they were afraid of? Yuan Tianxing looked at the upper reaches of the underground river and decided to go there to see why the water became like this. He wanted to see if he could find anything. The group started to walk along the edge of the cliff and up the river. Fortunately, there were many passageways on both sides of the river, but there were also some places that required rock climbing. Rock climbing was not a problem for the zombies. It was not a big problem for the psychics either. Therefore, the group continued to move forward safely for a long time until they heard the rushing sound of water flowing down in front of them. After a while, they walked under an underground waterfall. They shone the flashlight up and found that the waterfall was not very high. It was about 6 or 7 meters high. The place where the water came out was a flat oval black hole. The surrounding terrain was also very serious. There were cliffs all around. The only way forward was through the black hole. Chapter 1165. Fortunately, there was still some water on both sides of the hole, but it was still very dangerous to get too close. Be careful, don't fall into the water, Yuan Tianxing said as he jumped up and stood at the edge of the hole. Looking into the hole, there was an open space in front of them, and a huge underground lake appeared in front of them. Walala! Waves of ripples surged in the water. It was completely different from the calm underground river below. Yuan Tianxing did not need to look to know that there was a lot of danger coming from the lake, and he even felt that there were a lot of huge shadows surging in the water. The others quickly landed beside him, and all held their breath when they saw the lake. They did not feel any danger when they were below, but as soon as they came up, they immediately felt a sense of danger coming towards them. Just as they appeared, there were many dark shadows swimming at the bottom of the lake, all diving in their direction. When Lu Fang came up, his expression suddenly changed. He shouted, "Not good, there is something coming from the water. Get out of the way." At the same time, countless black tentacles suddenly burst out of the water not far in front of them, wriggling toward Yuan Tianxing and the others like snakes. Yuan Tianxing and the others reacted quickly and jumped back, once again falling down from where they came up. But these black tentacles were much faster than them, and Lei Yao, who reacted a little slower, was suddenly wrapped up. Lei Yao. Li Zheng's expression changed when he saw this, and he shouted. He quickly threw out a few huge ice blades and shot them towards the tentacles that wrapped around Lei Yao. Bang, bang, bang. However, Li Zheng's ice blades were shattered when they hit the tentacles. Just as Lei Yao was about to be dragged into the water, a metal spear flew out and pierced the tentacle with a puff sound. Old Man Guo raised his hands, a somewhat ferocious expression on his face, as he controlled the spear to lift it up, while the tentacle twisted and wanted to pull it down. The force was so strong that it made it difficult for Old Man Guo to control it in midair. Lei Yao also wanted to use his arcana to break free from the ghost entangling him, but he found that he could not use his arcana. He could not feel the energy in his arcana core at all. If he couldn't feel the energy of his ability, then his whole body wouldn't be able to exert any strength. At this moment, a huge mouth filled with fangs burst out from the water and swallowed Lei Yao whole. Suddenly, a huge rock weighing a few hundred kilograms fell from the ceiling of the cave and flew into the huge mouth. Lei Yao was suddenly flung out of the room. However, the direction in which he was thrown wasn't towards the outside of the cave, but towards the center of the lake. A vine quickly shot towards Lei Yao, catching him before he could fall into the water. Then, he suddenly pulled it back and threw it back into the air. Finally, after safely rescuing Lei Yao, everyone landed on the shore beside the waterfall, trembling in fear. "How are you? Are you hurt?" Li Zheng immediately ran to Lei Yao and asked worriedly. Lei Yao was still gasping for breath. He really thought that he was going to die here. Li Zheng's question jolted him back to his senses. He subconsciously looked down at his own body, then looked up and said to everyone, "I'm fine. You almost scared me to death. Be careful, brother." Feng Mingyu patted Lei Yao's shoulder. "Thank you." Lei Yao looked at him and thanked him. Feng Mingyu had thrown out the last vine to stop him from falling into the water. "All right, as long as you're fine." Yuan Tianxing looked at Lei Yao and saw that there was nothing wrong with his body. He nodded and turned to look at the cave entrance. Those tentacles looked like octopus tentacles, but they didn't have suction cups like octopus tentacles. Moreover, these tentacles were too long and thick. They were as thick as buckets and smooth. The huge mouth that had just appeared looked like the mouth of a fish. The 2 rows of sharp teeth in the mouth were horrifying. "What are those? Mutated fish? What are those tentacles?" Feng Mingyu asked in confusion. Everyone looked at each other, then turned to look at the cave entrance. From the shape of the mouth, it looks like a fish, but I don't know what those tentacles are. Could they be something that grew on that monster's body? Or another kind of monster? I don't know, but that thing is so big, and it feels like there's more than one in the water. Yuan Tianxing shook his head and looked at Lu Fang. "What do you feel?" Lu Fang turned back and nodded at him, then let out a long roar. "Roar." Old Man Guo explained for him. He said there's more than one. There are many of these things in the water, and those tentacles are also from this kind of fish. You may not be able to see them, but I can feel their shape in the water. Their bodies are actually round. Its whole body is covered with those tentacles, not like a fish that has a fish tail and a long strip. Everyone imagined a ball with a fish's head and a fish's mouth, and its body was full of tentacles that wriggled like tentacles. Why does it feel like a giant pufferfish? But pufferfish don't have tentacles, And they have tails. Lin Yu imagined an angry pufferfish with tentacles all over its body. It was an indescribable scene. Lu Fang glanced at him, thought for a moment, and then nodded. It did look a bit like a pufferfish, but this was a giant and a long-haired pufferfish. It's so aggressive. It seems that the hole is too small for them to come in. Yuan Tianxing looked at the hole and thought about the big mouth he saw just now. The fish's mouth was at least 10 meters wide, and it was about 3 to 4 meters high. The hole above the waterfall was oval, and it was only 2 to 3 meters high. The two sides were wide and long, but it was a bit narrow for these things. If the one just now wasn't the biggest, then the smallest one probably wasn't that much smaller. Is it because of the smell of these things that scared the gorillas away? Could it be that these things will run ashore? Li Zheng turned his head and looked back. They had walked a few kilometers from the gorilla's cave. Although it wasn't very close, it wasn't far either. Swoosh! Suddenly, many long and thick tentacles rushed out of the hole and instantly flew toward Yuan Tianxing and the others. Everyone dodged back, but the place on the shore was too small, and everyone's movements were very consistent. As a result, the place behind them was a bit crowded. Fortunately, a few high-level people jumped directly to the other side of the pool under the waterfall. Bang, bang, bang. After everyone dodged, those tentacles directly poked the place where they were just now, and all the rocks were blown away. After not catching their prey, these tentacles bounced up and continued to rush toward them. Their target was not only Yuan Tianxing and the others, but also Old Man Gua and the other zombies. A row of huge sawteeth flashed in the hole above. Chapter 1166. Why is there such a big lake underground, and there are such creatures in the lake? Has the entire Earth mutated? Not to mention the mutation on land, there are so many mutated things underground. Sigh, is the Earth going to be destroyed? Are we really going to build a huge spaceship like in the sci-fi movies, and take humans to the sky? Old Gua shook his head and said. Everyone looked at him speechlessly. It can't be that serious. It's not to the point where humans can't survive. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, whoosh whoosh whoosh. Although Yuan Tianxing and the others quickly moved far away, distancing themselves from the tentacle-like tentacles, those things didn't stop there. However, those things didn't stop there. They continued to squeeze their tentacles out of the holes in the waterfall and waved them around. Unwilling to give up, they reached out in their direction. Since they had distanced themselves, they didn't waste their energy to attack these tentacles. But with these things blocking their way, they couldn't continue to investigate further. The lake above was too big. When Yuan Tianxing went up to look inside, he couldn't even see the edge. He could only see the water, and the top of the cave separated by a rock wall that was dozens of meters high. The top was all black rocks. And it wasn't just the water here that had a problem. Even the surrounding rock walls were problematic. Just now, when Yuan Tianxing controlled the rock wall at the top of the cave, he found that the effect of his energy had been reduced by more than half. His control over these rocks had been greatly reduced by 70%, so he could only dig out a huge rock from above. He originally planned to control the rocks above to extend downwards and directly crush the monster. But reality told him that he couldn't do it. Let's retreat first, we can't go any further. If I'm not wrong, this water is polluted by these things. Maybe they suddenly appeared here recently, but I don't know how they appeared. Let's see if there's another way to go up. Yuan Tianxing retreated to the edge of a protruding rock wall and said to everyone. The 100-meter-long tentacles of the water monster swayed in the air for a while, but they couldn't reach Yuan Tianxing and the others, so they gradually retreated. However, just as Yuan Tianxing and the others were going back the way they came, suddenly, there was a loud bang at the hole in the waterfall, and then the surrounding began to shake. Many stones rolled down from the surrounding stone walls, some even cracked and fell down. Not good. Retreat. Yuan Tianxing was startled by the sound. He looked up, and his expression changed. He immediately shouted, Hua bang! Another loud noise came from the cave entrance. Yuan Tianxing and the others felt their feet becoming unsteady. At the same time, the hole that was originally only 2 to 3 meters high was smashed open by the heads of the huge fish monsters. causing rocks to fly everywhere. Like a dam that had been broken by a flood, the water surged down violently. The black waves came crashing down like some terrible monster. The zombies' reactions were very fast. Everyone's instinctive sense of danger made them all flash their claws and jump up the cliff. Feng Mingyu and a few other humans who were slower to react were all dragged down. Li Zheng and the others didn't have the instincts of zombies. By the time they reacted, a large amount of water had already poured down, splashing everywhere. The water was dangerous, they could not touch it. Although they understood, their bodies' reactions were a bit slower. Yuan Tianqing's level was high, so he was able to react in time. However, when he saw his subordinate Fei Chonglin was about to be splashed with the black water, he suddenly stomped on the rock wall and dashed toward Fei Chonglin. He then kicked him away. At the same time, the skin on his body turned to stone. The moment he kicked Fei Chonglin away, he used Fei Chonglin's body to propel himself to the other side. The black water that was about to splash on Fei Chonglin's body directly splashed onto Yuan Tianqing. Fei Chonglin was kicked away and hit the cliff next to him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and used his hands to grab the protruding rocks on the cliff. He didn't fall directly into the river. After feeling that he was safe, he immediately remembered that Yuan Tianqing had blocked the black water for him. He subconsciously called out worriedly, "Deputy Leader, are you okay?" Yuan Tianqing landed on the other side of the stone wall. He spent a lot of energy to open up a very shallow hole in the stone wall, and then he fell into the hole. He turned around and waved at Fei Chonglin, then said loudly, "I'm fine, let's get out of here." Fei Chonglin, Lei Yao, Feng Mingyu, and Lin Yu were the weakest in the team. Their abilities were not above rank 3. Lin Yu was only rank 2. He hadn't even broken through to rank 3. The reason why Yuan Tianqing brought them down was because they were his subordinates he was most familiar with, and also because they were members of the intelligence department when they were in Hades King's base, so their observation skills were better. Now that they had encountered such an irresistible situation, although their reactions and thoughts were able to keep up, their physical strength could not. That was why Lei Yao and Fei Chonglin were in such a dangerous situation. Of course, Yuan Tianqing couldn't just stand by and watch when he could save them. Although he told them that he was fine, he was the only one who knew the actual situation. His entire body's skin, and even his muscles had turned into stone using his special ability. His entire person had actually become a walking stone statue. He was invulnerable to weapons and could not be physically harmed. However, after being splashed by the black water, he still felt as if his skin was being burned by fire. From his neck to his shoulders and half of his chest, it was as if he had been burned by an ultra-high temperature fire. It was as if his flesh and blood were about to melt. However, he endured the pain and didn't show it on his face. After landing in the hole in the stone wall, he immediately jumped back out. At this time, everyone had already retreated as fast as they could. This section of the underground river wasn't very deep, but the black water from the lake had expanded, and the water level had risen a lot. Fortunately, everyone found a place to rest before the water reached the top, so they didn't hesitate to escape. Bang, bang, bang. Sounds of impact could still be heard from the hole where the waterfall was. Every time it hit, the ground shook. The creatures in the lake didn't give up and continued to slam into the hole, smashing many of the stone walls at the edge of the hole. Before, when there was no food, they could still quietly stay here, killing each other and eating each other's meat to survive. Now that there was prey that tasted even more delicious than their own, they immediately became restless. That was why they rushed into the hole, wanting to rush out and hunt for food. Chapter 1167. Yuan Tianqing didn't expect that he could still be hurt by the water of the underground river, even though he was petrified with his supernatural ability. "I think it's better to seal this place. We can't let those things run out along the underground river." Old Man Guo frowned and said after they arrived at a safe place. Yuan Tianqing said, "You guys go out first. I'll try." He looked at the upstream of the river. After the dam burst, the water level of the underground river had risen a lot. He was an earth elemental, and the strongest one here. He was the only one who could block the river. You want to go alone? It's too dangerous. When Li Zheng heard what he said, he immediately disagreed. You guys can't help even if you go. It's better to go up first. In case something unexpected happens here. Yuan Tianqing said to them expressionlessly. Although Li Zheng didn't agree with his approach, Yuan Tianqing's words were not unreasonable. Even if they followed, they would only be a burden. He looked at Old Man Gua and wanted him to say something. In the end, Old Man Gua patted Yuan Tianqing's shoulder without hesitation and said, "All right, go ahead. We'll wait for you at the entrance of the underground gorillas." The old man turned around and continued to walk forward. Li Zheng heard him say this and was a little surprised and wanted to say something. At this moment, Yuan Tianqing also patted his shoulder and said, "All right, listen to my orders." Li Zheng had no choice but to respond, "Yes." Then he led the others and left with Old Man Gua. On the other side, Lin Wenwen, who had returned to 7 years ago, used Dong Xinxin's identity to buy a bunch of things. When the delivery man brought the things to the front door of the Dong family's mansion, the Dong family's butler and bodyguards were dumbfounded. Fortunately, Lin Wenwen had informed the guard in advance. If someone delivered to the door, they could just let them in. Otherwise, the delivery man wouldn't be able to come in. Looking at the bags of rice and noodles, as well as all kinds of packaged food, supplies, and medicine in the warehouse, the old butler was dumbfounded. The old housekeeper was really confused. He couldn't help but pull Dong Lijia and ask quietly, "What does second miss want to do? Why did you buy so much rice?" Their second miss had been really strange these days. Her taste in food had changed. She was either working out in the gym or running in the backyard. How was she still the lazy fat second miss from before? After Lin Wenwen asked his men to move all the goods into the warehouse, he chased everyone out. Then, he closed the door and went inside to collect his things, storing them all in the space. Anyway, she had a lot of space now. It was not a problem for her to store dozens of tons of rice. Looking at Dong Lijia's increasingly distressed expression, Lin Wenwen felt very relaxed. In order to exchange bodies with the real Dong Xinxin, she worked hard to help her lose weight, while continuing to conquer her brother. But looking at the clean food before the apocalypse, Lin Wenwen was willing to help her. Anyway, her space was static. Since she could bring back things from 7 years later, she should be able to put things in her space and bring them back. Lin Wenwen was not worried about this problem. What she was more worried about was whether Dong Xinxin could really send her back. After a few days of communication, she finally figured out what Dong Xinxin's special ability was. Space-time shift, a very, very powerful special ability. For someone like her, the space element was too weak. Anyway, after the apocalypse, although there were not many space abilities, at least there were many in every base. However, compared to Dong Xinxin's ability, it seemed very ordinary. According to what Dong Xinxin said before, she could actually make herself go back to a point in time that she had experienced before. It was more like controlling time, but not the kind that could control time. The difference was that when she went back, there would really be two Dong Xinxin. Then as long as she and the previous Dong Xinxin looked at each other face to face, they could merge into one. It could also be said that she returned to that point in time, but it was not the way to go back in time. Moreover, the time she went back also changed according to the level of her ability. In the beginning, she could only go back half an hour. She couldn't go back more than half an hour. Until the second level, she could go back 12 hours. Then the third level, she could go back 3 days. At the fourth level, she could go back 1 month. She had never told anyone about this special ability, only she knew about it. When she went out with the zombie hunting team to kill zombies, she also used guns and knives. This kind of special and powerful ability, she definitely did not dare to tell others. Dong Xinxin, who had survived for 7 years after the apocalypse, was no longer the Dong Xinxin, who foolishly believed everyone before the apocalypse. This time, when she died, her energy core used up the last trace of energy to activate her ability. She did not expect to return to 7 years ago. Those two women are really attentive. They would ask you out to play every other day, What happened to you guys? Lin Wenwen chatted with Dong Xinxin while collecting supplies in the warehouse. These days, Qin Jiao and Lin Yuehui called her every day to ask her out to play. They said that Dong Xinxin had too few friends before, so she didn't have much time to play. They also said that this summer vacation was her last indulgence. When school started, she would enter the 3rd year of high school and have to sprint for the college entrance examination. At that time, she would have no time to play and so on. On one hand, they said it was for her own good, but on the other hand, they secretly wanted her to go to a crowded place and embarrass herself. This was Lin Wenwen's thoughts after interacting with these two for the past few days. During the apocalypse, Qin Jiao became a zombie, but Lin Yuehui didn't. She awakened her water ability. When they escaped to the survival camp, she gradually became the core of the team. Dong Xinxin said in her mind, "Didn't you guys go together at that time?" Lin Wenwen asked curiously. "No, when the apocalypse came, who would care about others? At that time we weren't with her." Dong Xinxin said lightly. Lin Wenwen listened and nodded. When it was time for dinner, Lin Wenwen looked at the long table full of delicious dishes and happily ate. Other than her and Dong Lijia, there was also a middle-aged man and a well-maintained middle-aged woman. She heard from Dong Xinxin that when the apocalypse came, their family was very lucky not to become zombies, but they also did not awaken their abilities. But later on the way to the survival camp, her father, in order to protect the last packet of instant noodles for her, got into a conflict and was shot to death by the other party. At that time, they didn't have their abilities, so in the eyes of the other party, they were nothing. And a few days after that, her mother was secretly pushed into the zombies when she was trying to break out of the zombie horde. She was scratched by the zombies, and then her mother committed suicide. After seeing the ugliness of human nature after the apocalypse, Dong Xinxin, who was now talking to Lin Wenwen, always had a kind of indifference in his tone. Chapter 1168. Xinxin, slow down. Eating too fast isn't good for your stomach. The middle-aged woman looked at her daughter's unusual eating habits and couldn't help but advise her. Ow! Lin Wenwen was gnawing on a piece of pork rib when he heard the middle-aged woman's words. He had no choice but to change the way he ate. Xinxin, I heard that you haven't gone out these few days and have been working out at home? Have you made up your mind this time? Mr. Dong was a fat man with a big belly. He exuded a refined temperament that people who worked hard in the business world would have. He looked at Lin Wenwen and asked pleasantly. Lin Wenwen nodded. Yes, that's right. Uncle, Dad, if you have time, you should also pay attention to exercise more. Looking at Dong Xinxin's father, Lin Wenwen almost called the wrong person. Why do you suddenly want to work out? Did someone attack you? Mr. Dong didn't take Lin Wenwen's words to heart, but was concerned about his daughter's abnormality. No. Lin Wenwen shook his head. After thinking for a while, he said, It's to prepare for 3 months later. 3 months later? 3rd year in high school? You don't have to work so hard. Mrs. Dong thought that Lin Wenwen was talking about the time when school started. Lin Wenwen glanced at Dong Lijia, who was eating quietly with his head lowered, and then shook his head. No. There would be no high school for her in 3 months. No. Then why? Is there anything else? Mrs. Dong looked at her with doubt. That's right. Well, you can ask Dong Lijia to tell you when it's convenient. All right, I'm full. Lin Wenwen knew that Dong Lijia had not told them about the end of the world, so he decided to push him. After saying that, he put down the empty bowl, got up and slipped away. Hey Xinxin, you just ate a bowl of rice. Why are you so full? Mrs. Dong didn't expect her to slip away so quickly. She subconsciously looked at her back and said, Dong Lijia, who was engrossed in eating, was suddenly reminded by Lin Wenwen. He wasn't ready to confess to his father yet. He was a little flustered. What did Xinxin ask you to tell us? Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia and asked. Oh, that. I don't know how to tell you right now. Let me think about it first. I'll tell you when I'm done. In the past few days, Dong Lijia had begun to sell the small companies in his hands. He had also begun to sell the stocks he bought in the university. However, He had yet to figure out how to convince his father. After all, no one would believe such a thing. Why are you being so mysterious? Mrs. Dong glanced at him in confusion and continued to eat. Then, you can tell me when you have thought about it. Mr. Dong's character was still relatively good to his child, and he was not strict with him. Seeing that Dong Lijia had not thought it through, he said so. On the other hand, Lin Wenwen had just finished his meal and was taking a stroll in the courtyard to aid digestion when his phone rang. Lin Wenwen rolled his eyes when he saw Qin Jiao's name. Then he hung up and continued his stroll. Unexpectedly, after she hung up, the phone rang again. It was still Qin Jiao. Lin Wenwen answered impatiently. Hello, what's the matter? Qin Jiao heard the impatience in her tone. She looked at Lin Yuehui who was beside her. Then she said with a smile, Xin, are you going to hang out with your brother today? I heard that he and Chunfei are going to the Luo family to celebrate second young master Luo's birthday. Will you come too? Second young master Luo? Who is that? Lin Wenwen asked Dong Xin in her mind in confusion, but she said perfunctorily, What does it have to do with me? I don't want to go. Dong Xin said to her in her mind, Second young master Luo is my brother's best friend, but he is very annoying. If you have the chance, help me beat him up. When talking about second young master Luo, Dong Xin's tone had a rare more angry emotion, but it did not seem that he was really angry. Lin Wenwen rolled her eyes and smiled. Oh, it seemed that these two guys had a story. However, from her observations over the past few days, Deng Chunfei, who often came to her house, seemed to be a little strange. On the surface, he said that he was looking for Dong Lijia, but in fact, he often glanced at her. Lin Wenwen pretended not to see it, but it did not mean that she did not know. She just noticed that when Dong Xin talked about Deng Chunfei, his tone was usually cold and calm. It seemed that there was no hope for Deng Chunfei. Why? Isn't second young master Luo your brother's best friend? He invited you to, right? Wouldn't it be disrespectful if you don't go? After hearing Lin Wenwen's answer, Qin Jiao did not give up and asked her. Originally, she wanted to lie down on her birthday and let Dong Xin make a joke out of her. It could be funny, and it could also discuss those rich heirs. When that time came, everyone would definitely look at her as a joke. Then they could pretend to help her. On one hand, they could get a good impression from her, and on the other hand, they could get a good impression from Dong Lijia. However, if she refused to come, then wouldn't their plan be ruined? Thinking of this, Qin Jiao was a little anxious, and she kept blinking at Lin Yuehui. Lin Yuehui found a notebook in her room and wrote 3 words on it. Wu Mingho. Seeing the name Wu Mingho, Qin Jiao's eyes immediately lit up, and she said, But if you don't come, then you won't be able to see Wu Mingho, right? Didn't you say that you like him? Lin Wenwen heard another unfamiliar name, and she was a little speechless. She said, That was in the past. However, in her heart, she said to Dong Xin, You like this Wu Mingho? They found so many bait to lure you. It seems like they won't stop until they see you tonight. Then Dong Xin said to her coldly, Like you said, that was in the past. Who cares who he is now? Lin Wenwen nodded in her heart, but before Qin Jiao could speak, she said, All right, let me think about whether to go tonight or not. Maybe I'll go if I'm in a good mood. Don't call me again to talk about this, okay? That's all for now. With that, she hung up the phone and turned it off. Qin Jiao, who was on the opposite side, looked at Lin Yuehui with a confused face and said, She actually said that she'll come if she's in a good mood? Does she not like Wu Mingho anymore? Lin Yuehui listened to her words and showed a puzzled expression, and then said with some disbelief, It doesn't seem like it. She blushed when she saw Wu Mingho. Her face was clearly red, but she couldn't help but peek. How could she suddenly not like him? Or did Wu Mingho do something to her? Qin Jiao looked at her. Then what should we do now? If she really doesn't come tonight, then wouldn't our previous arrangements be in vain? Lin Yuehui thought about it and shook her head. I think she will definitely come. Let's wait and see. Chapter 1169. Qin Jiao glanced at the phone in her hand and threw it on the table. She said with a puzzled expression, Why has Dong Xinxin's attitude been so strange these days? Did she find out something? Dong Xinxin had been very cold to them these days. They had known each other for a year, and it wasn't easy to build a good relationship with her. She had finally reached the stage where she would listen to everything they said. Why was there such a huge gap between them in the past few days? Did she hear something from others? Their social circle wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. Which of the rich young masters and daughters in the city didn't know that Dong Lijia had a very fat sister? Of course, there were many people who had seen her. It was just that Dong Xinxin was more introverted and silly. People wanted to be friends with her not because of her endless pocket money, but because of her identity. Otherwise, who would want to stay with such a fat pig all day long? None of them wanted to be friends with her. And those who treated her as a friend were pushed away by those who approached her with ulterior motives. In order to get close to Dong Lijia, Qin Jiao carefully investigated Dong Xinxin's situation and tried to build a good relationship with her. It's possible. Lin Yuehui also felt that Dong Xinxin's attitude towards them had changed these days. After thinking about it, she felt that Qin Jiao's words were very likely to be true. Why don't we find someone to check if she has been in contact with anyone recently? Her change in attitude must be caused by someone. I want to see who is secretly trying to ruin our relationship. Qin Jiao thought about it, and her delicate face became a little gloomy. A cold light flashed through her meticulously applied eye makeup. She bent down to pick up the phone again, found a number, and dialed it. Hello. Help me check if Dong Xinxin has been in contact with any strange people in the past few days. If he didn't find anything in the past few days, he would continue to check the time before that. In a week or a month or two. I want to know the reason for her change in attitude recently. After finishing the call, she put down the phone and looked at Lin Yuehui. Lin Yuehui still had a thoughtful expression on her face. She was thinking about the last time they went shopping with Dong Xinxin. Did anything happen? She remembered that Dong Xinxin had been a little strange that day. After Lin Wenwen hung up the phone, she took a walk for an hour before returning to her room. She saw Dong Lijia sitting in her room with a frown and a bitter look on his face. What? Look at your expression. You haven't said anything yet. I've already found a chance for you to say it. Why are you still hesitating? We don't have much time left. Lin Wenwen knew what he was thinking when he saw his expression. Dong Lijia said, I'm afraid they won't believe me. Why don't you come with me? If you are with me, it will be more believable. Lin Wenwen thought about it and said, That's fine, but you have to promise me something. Lin Wenwen thought and said, What? Lin Wenwen said, I will persuade them as your sister. You have to help me hide my identity. Dong Lijia stared at her for 3 seconds before he reacted. Are you trying to say that you pretended to be my sister and experienced the apocalypse, and then suddenly came back? Lin Wenwen nodded and said, Otherwise, even if you say I'm another person, they definitely won't believe it. I could tell them that I suddenly had 7 more years of memories. And then I experienced death. And then I was reborn. Moreover, the Dong Xinxin in 7 years would be different from the Dong Xinxin now. I can copy her and make some changes to make your parents believe me. After all, he had to choose between believing in a stranger who had taken over his daughter's body or believing that his daughter would return 7 years later. I think the latter is more believable. Dong Lijia thought for a moment and nodded. Then he asked her, You know my sister's life and experience 7 years later? Lin Wenwen said, Of course I know. Didn't I say that she's still in this body? In the past few days, he had only woken up occasionally. Most of the time he had been asleep. But when she woke up, she told me a lot of things. Dong Lijia looked at her knowingly and agreed with her idea. Then he stood up and said to her, In that case, I'll do as you say. Let's go find my dad now. Then he walked to the door, opened it, and stood there looking back at her. Lin Wenwen shrugged and followed him out. They found Mr. Dong's study after many turns. Lin Wenwen complained, I really don't understand you rich people. Don't you feel very insecure living in such a big house? Dong Lijia said carelessly, No, maybe I'm used to it. Besides, there are bodyguards and servants at home. But I haven't asked you, what did you do before? How old are you? Are you a man or a woman? Damn. Are you a man? At the end of his words, Dong Lijia suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Wenwen in horror. He thought that this was a man who occupied his sister's body, and then saw her naked body. Dong Lijia suddenly had the urge to go crazy. Ah! Tell me you're a woman, right? Am I right? Dong Lijia suddenly pulled Lin Wenwen to the corner of the corridor and pressed her against the wall. He stared at her in horror and asked anxiously, Lin Wenwen. Wasn't her reaction a little too slow? How many days had passed before he thought of asking her this question? Looking at Dong Lijia's expression that was about to break down, she said quietly, If I say I'm a man, what will you do? Dong Lijia's expression instantly stiffened. The two of them looked at each other in silence. After a long time, Dong Lijia's face suddenly darkened. He stared at her and said, Marry her. Lin Wenwen. Pfft. She pushed Dong Lijia away expressionlessly, and Lin Wenwen immediately covered her mouth and laughed like crazy. Pfft, haha. Don't worry, I'm just teasing you, she said as she walked forward. Dong Lijia was stunned, and his face darkened. You lied to me before? No. I don't believe what you said after. Tell me, who are you? Don't go if you don't tell me. Dong Lijia pulled her back angrily and continued to press her against the wall. If the other party was really a man, after hearing that she wanted him to be responsible for Xin and marry her, he immediately changed his mind and lied to her again? No way. This man had seen and touched his sister's body. If he just left like that, then wouldn't his Xin be at a loss? At the thought of this, Dong Lijia felt terrible. As a sister complex, he was now in full force. He looked at Lin Wenwen, as if she was a scumbag who had taken advantage of his sister. When Lin Wenwen saw his persistent gaze, she suddenly felt like she had shot herself in the foot. Chapter 1170. You should clean up your own joke. No, I'm really a woman. I'm not lying to you. Lin Wenwen quickly said to Dong Lijia. Looking at Dong Lijia, who was about to go berserk, Lin Wenwen was a little scared. What if this guy always treated her as a man and pestered her every day to be responsible for Dong Xin in the future? Although when she returned to 7 years later, the things here should no longer have anything to do with her. But if he pestered her every day for the next few months, she would be annoyed to death by him. Dong Lijia gritted his teeth and stared at her. How are you going to prove it? Prove what? Lin Wenwen was about to answer him when Mr. Dong's voice suddenly came from the side. The two turned their heads at the same time and saw Mr. Dong standing not far away with a big belly, looking at them blankly. Dong Lijia looked back and suddenly realized that the current posture of the two was a little strange in his father's eyes. He instantly let go of his hand and took a step back. No, nothing. Dad, we have something to talk to you about. Of course, he couldn't tell his father that there was another person living in Dong Xinxin's body. Now, even if the other party didn't ask him for help, he had to help him hide it. If his father knew that there was an unknown man living in Xinxin's body, he might go berserk like him. It's about the thing we talked about today. Come on. Mr. Dong looked at the two of them back and forth in confusion, then turned around and walked to his study. Lin Wenwen quickly slipped out to distance herself from Dong Lijia. Behind her, Dong Lijia made a "I'll look for you when the business is done" gesture. After entering Mr. Dong's study, Mr. Dong sat on the sofa. He pointed to the sofa next to him and asked them to sit down. The study of a rich man was very big. The room of more than 100 square meters was filled with bookcases on one side, and there was a luxurious rectangular desk in front of the bookcase. On the other side, there was a luxurious sofa and coffee table. The room was also decorated with many famous paintings and expensive handicrafts. Tell me, what are you hiding from us? Xinxin suddenly went to the gym to lose weight, and Jejia has been mysterious these days. After seeing the two sitting down, Mr. Dong asked them curiously. The two of them looked at each other. Dong Lijia looked at Lin Wenwen with some anger in his eyes. Pointing at Lin Wenwen, he turned to his father and said, She said that in 2 months and 25 days, it will be the end of the world. Dad, ask her. Lin Wenwen, who was suddenly used as a gun, was speechless. This wasn't the opening they had agreed on. Why did he suddenly throw the blame to her? Was it because of what happened just now? What? Jia, can you repeat what you just said? Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia in disbelief and confusion, as if he had heard something incredible. He did not understand why Dong Lijia would suddenly say such a thing. Dong Lijia pointed in Lin Wenwen's direction and said, "He said it. Dad, ask him. With that, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and turned his face to the side. Looking at Dong Lijia's willful look, Lin Wenwen could only quietly turn his head to look at Mr. Dong. He's right, it's true. On the night of September 1st, the whole world will be changed. On the morning of September 2nd, the whole world will fall into panic and chaos. 90% of the people in the city will become mindless living dead," she said to Mr. Dong very seriously. But Mr. Dong's eyes told her that he was now like a psycho. Jia, your sister hasn't been entangled by any strange organization recently, right? After listening to Lin Wenwen, Mr. Dong turned to look at Dong Lijia and asked. Dong Lijia snorted and said, "No." Mr. Dong pointed at Dong Xinshin in confusion. "Then do you really believe what she said now?" Dong Lijia thought for a moment and suddenly stood up. He lowered his head and hooked his finger at Lin Wenwen. Then he said, Come, let's fight." As he spoke, he walked to the empty space in the middle of the study. When Mr. Dong heard this, he immediately slammed the table and glared at him angrily. "Nonsense! Are you going to hit your sister?" Dong Lijia was intimidated by his imposing manner and shrank his neck. But he said firmly, "We still don't know who's going to hit who. Why don't you come over?" After saying that, he glared at Lin Wenwen again. Lin Wenwen was speechless. He really wanted to fight with her. And he wanted to fight her as if she were a man. However, in order to make Mr. Dong believe this, she could only make a move. "Okay then, Dad, just watch and you'll know if what I said just now is true or not." As she spoke, she also stood up. Although it was weird to call another uncle Dad, for her identity, she still had to call him that. Mr. Dong looked at her with a confused face. He thought to himself, is she really going to fight with her brother? Then he turned his head to look at Dong Lijia. But he saw that Dong Lijia's eyes didn't have any intention of backing down. Instead, he was a little angry. Why was he angry? As soon as Lin Wenwen stood up, Dong Lijia unceremoniously waved his fist and rushed over. Her imposing manner scared Papa Dong, and his face changed. He subconsciously said to stop him. "Wait a minute." However, before he finished shouting, he saw his fat daughter use a very agile posture to lean to the side, nimbly raised her hand and caught Dong Lijia's fist. Then she turned her body and kicked. Bang! Ouch! Mr. Dong watched helplessly as Dong Lijia was thrown to the ground by Lin Wenwen with ease. Again, Dong Lijia got up and rushed towards Lin Wenwen again, continuing to punch her in the face. At this time, he was relieved that Lin Wenwen would definitely be able to dodge it. At the same time, he thought that even if he could hit Dong Xinshin's face, it wasn't his sister who would be hurt. Anyway, it was just a fist, and it wouldn't have the effect of disfigurement. Lin Wenwen also just calmly tilted her head, and then quickly reached out and hit the elbow of his outstretched hand with her knuckles, and then poked hard in his armpit. Then, Dong Lijia's face twisted in pain as if his toes had been hit. He bent over and jumped to the side, screaming. Lin Wenwen clapped her hands, then turned back to look at Mr. Dong and said, "How about it? If you really know your biological daughter, then you should know that she wouldn't do this." Mr. Dong closed his stiff jaw, and then began to look at Lin Wenwen with surprise and uncertainty. He was a man in his 20s. To be able to build such a large listed company from scratch, of course, he had seen a lot of scenes. And although his son's attack just now was a little fake, his daughter's very skillful dodging and counterattack was something he couldn't understand. Because his daughter had never learned fighting or martial arts. You, who are you? Chapter 1171. I'm your daughter, but my mental age is 24 years old, not 17 years old like I am now. So of course it's different. Lin Wenwen said calmly when he heard him ask who he was. She looked around and said, "If it weren't for this body being too fat and weak, I would be able to throw him 10 meters away. I would be able to throw him 10 meters away. As he spoke, Lin Wenwen pointed at Dong Lijia, who was still grimacing in pain. Dong Lijia's arm, which had been hit by Lin Wenwen, was hanging limply. Dong Lijia was hit on the nerve-numbing acupuncture point, and it was as if he was struck by electricity. His whole arm was in pain and numb, and he didn't want to try it again. So she's been working hard to lose weight these days. In fact, she's not just working out, she's training. In order to improve her stamina and strength as soon as possible, Dong Lijia explained. Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia, and then looked at Lin Wenwen. He knew very well that even if Dong Lijia stood there and stretched out his hand to her, Dong Xinxin wouldn't be able to throw him over, let alone throw him over her shoulder so cleanly, quickly, and accurately like she did just now. He was very surprised and he began to feel conflicted, because what his daughter said just now was like nonsense. What doomsday? What people all over the world would become mindless living dead? It wasn't like a scene in a zombie movie. How could it happen in the real world? But his daughter's current action was really beyond the scope of his understanding. You. First tell me how you know this kind of fighting skill. And what's with the mental age of 24 you just said? Mr. Dong looked at her with a headache and asked. Oh, after the apocalypse, if you're not agile enough and your reaction isn't fast enough, you'll be eaten by zombies. Mental age is what I came back from 7 years in the future. Dad, I'm no longer the 17-year-old me now, Lin Wenwen said to him with a serious expression. She paused and then continued. I know what will happen from now to 7 years in the future. I've lived in the apocalypse for 7 years. And not only did I learn some self-defense and fighting skills, I also learned to see through people's hearts. So believe me, what I said just now is not false. Mr. Dong's head was hurting, and he still couldn't understand why his daughter suddenly became like this. He still didn't believe what she said. But his daughter said it as if it was true. I still can't believe it. Xinxin, what you're saying is too illogical. He looked at Lin Wenwen and said, Then how do you explain everything that has changed in me? This isn't scientific either. How about this? I'll prove it to you again. Can you give me a real gun? Lin Wenwen looked at him and thought for a while, then suddenly asked him for a gun. She knew that it was very easy for someone at Mr. Dong's level to get a real gun. With his abilities, it wouldn't be a problem for him to do a few dozen of them in secret. Although she really wanted to take one out of her space, it would mean that she would expose the existence of her space. Although Dong Lijia already knew, Dong Lijia would definitely not let her do this in order to hide her true identity. If she used the space now, wouldn't it be strange if Dong Xinxin didn't have the space after she left? What? Why do you still want that thing? Don't touch such a dangerous thing. As soon as he heard that she wanted a gun, Mr. Dong's attitude immediately changed. A real gun? This wasn't a joke. If it went off by accident, people would die. If you don't give it to me, how can I prove to you that I experienced those 7 years? Don't worry, you can remove all the bullets. Lin Wenwen said. No, how can a child play with this? Mr. Dong still shook his head at her with a straight face. Lin Wenwen could only look at Dong Lijia. He was supposed to be the one to convince the adults, but now it was her doing it. It was only right for her to seek some help from him. Dong Lijia was still brooding over her true identity as a short, ugly and wretched man. But he had to respond to her eye signal. Dad, give it to her. Since you think she's talking nonsense, then you should give her a chance to prove it. Besides, she also said that the gun is empty, so nothing will happen. Just see what she wants to do with the gun. Dong Lijia persuaded his father. Mr. Dong looked at him angrily. Do you believe what she said? How can you believe such unrealistic words? Dong Lijia saw that his father wasn't willing to give something dangerous like a gun to Lin Wenwen. So he immediately got up and walked to the bookshelf in the study. He looked at one of the shelves, then pushed open the book on it, and reached in to search for it. Mr. Dong was a little excited when he saw his actions. He stood up and said, Stop. How do you know where it is? After Dong Lijia finished searching, he quickly withdrew his hand. Then he saw that there was a secret compartment in the bookshelf. There was a Type 64 pistol in the secret compartment. This was a real pistol. Oh, I know all your secrets. I also know where you hide your pocket money. Do you want me to tell my mom? Dong Lijia said to Mr. Dong while taking out the gun. Don't you dare. When Mr. Dong heard that he knew where he hid his pocket money, he immediately scolded him fiercely. But his voice was a little weak, and he subconsciously looked at the door. Dong Lijia didn't care about him. He took the gun and removed all the bullets, then put the empty gun in front of Lin Wenwen. Lin Wenwen had previously asked Dong Xinxin how long it would take for her to disassemble an ordinary pistol. Everyone was familiar with disassembling and reassembling guns in the apocalypse, and Dong Xinxin often went out to hunt zombies. Dong Xinxin told her that the fastest time from disassembling to reassembling a gun was 15 seconds. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was considered fast. Lin Wenwen's own speed was about the same. If she didn't train in the base for a year, she wouldn't be able to do it. Seeing that Dong Lijia brought the gun over, she took the gun and took out the magazine for the two to see. There were no bullets, so there was no danger of fire. Then after putting the magazine in, she began to skillfully disassemble the gun. After disassembling it, she quickly reassembled it. Her movements were like flowing water, so fast that the other two men couldn't see her movements clearly. Kacha, 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 kacha. After the sound of mechanical assembly, the gun that she disassembled was reassembled. In fact, her movements weren't very fast, but they weren't slow either. If she wasn't familiar with guns, she wouldn't be able to do this. Okay, you guys can check it. Then Dad, think about whether I could do this in the past. And then think about whether you should believe what I said before. After Lin Wenwen said this, he stood up. I'll go back to my room first. After saying this, she left. Anyway, Mr. Dong was the same as Dong Lijia. He just needed time to digest. The two men of the Dong family silently looked at the gun that she reassembled. Chapter 1172. Back in the room, Lin Wenwen was about to change her clothes and go to the gym to work out. After a few days of adjustment and exercise, her whole body was still sore. But she still needed to persevere. She had tried it before, but it wasn't as difficult as it was now. This body was too fat. She changed her clothes and was about to go to the gym to work out for another 2 hours. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Dong Lijia walking towards her while talking on the phone. Well, don't worry. I'll be there soon. I won't be late. Okay, that's all for now. Seeing Lin Wenwen appear, he immediately hung up the phone. Then he stopped in front of her and looked at her sportswear. You're very active. If my sister were to lose weight herself, she probably wouldn't be able to persevere for a day. Lin Wenwen shrugged and looked at him. That's not necessarily true. What I said was right. Dong Xinxin is not the 17-year-old Dong Xinxin who knows nothing. She may be able to persevere longer than me. She had no choice but to persevere. In order to let Dong Xinxin get some energy from this body to recover, and then find a way to send herself back to time and space 7 years later. She could only do as he said. What's the matter? She looked at Dong Lijia and asked. Dong Lijia looked at her and still didn't give up. Are you a man or not? Tell me your real identity. I'll check if you're lying. If you dare to lie to me, I'll... What? Hit me. You can't beat me, right? Plot against me. That's possible. But I already said I'm not a man. You're really persistent. Besides, even if I'm a man and have sex with your sister, I won't marry her. Even if that's the case, it's still impossible for you to marry her. Besides, have you asked your sister's opinion? You only know how to worry here. Seeing that he still didn't let go of the joke just now, Lin Wenwen raised her hand and pushed him away. She finally felt another advantage of Dong Xinxin's current body. Fat, heavy weight. Although she didn't have that much strength, when her lower body was stable, she could knock people away. You wait. After being rebuked by Lin Wenwen, Dong Lijia was even more certain that there was a man living in his sister's body. What a big temper. This is between me and Dong Xinxin. It's better for you to stay out of it. Even my brother isn't like you. Lin Wenwen said with his back facing him as he walked toward the gym. That's because Xinxin is still young and doesn't know anything. No, wait. Don't go yet. In Dong Lijia's heart, his sister was still determined that he should protect her when she was 17 years old. This was his responsibility as an elder brother. But very quickly, he thought of something else and hurriedly called out to her. Then he strode toward her. Now go back and change into a nice dress. Come with me to a place. He walked up and grabbed Lin Wenwen's hand, turning her around to face him. Gown? What the hell? Why would I exchange for that? Lin Wenwen looked at him with a puzzled expression. She suddenly thought of the place he mentioned and asked, Wait, are you taking me to the place where second young Master Luo is? Hearing her words, Dong Lijia immediately showed a surprised expression. Hey, how do you know? Lin Wenwen rolled his eyes and said, It's all because of those two idiot women who called me and told me that I had to go. Although I don't plan to go. Idiot women? Who? Dong Lijia didn't understand who she was talking about for a moment, and looked a little confused. Tut, it doesn't matter who it is. The important thing is that you want to take me there. But I won't go, Lin Wenwen said to him firmly, and immediately turned to leave. Now, she just wanted to spend her time helping Dong Xinxin recover, and sending herself back. She also wanted to buy a bunch of things, and put them in her telepathic eye space. Why not? Don't you want to see? Oh no, my Xinxin wants to see Wu Mingho. She begged me to take her there last time. Although you're not her now, you're using her body. You have to help her show her presence in front of Wu Mingho. And I told them that I will take Xinxin there. How can you not go? Hearing that she didn't want to go, Dong Lijia immediately objected. Then, he jumped in front of her and blocked her way as he spoke. Lin Wenwen was simply annoyed to death by his sister complex. He actually wanted to help his sister show her presence in front of the person she liked? At this time, shouldn't he tell her to focus on her studies and not be distracted by love? So she said that she wouldn't go and didn't want to go. Then Dong Lijia immediately looked at her suspiciously and said, You don't want to go because you are actually a man? Because your body has become a woman, so you don't want to go? Lin Wenwen didn't think that he would bring this up again. She simply wanted to kick him away and be done with it. She smiled insincerely and said to him with sparks in her eyes, Your sister is not interested in this Wu Mingho. Who knows if this Wu Mingho will turn into a zombie in 3 months? I don't want to waste this time. Go away, go away. It was fine if those two women annoyed her, since they couldn't get in front of her anyway. She didn't think that Dong Lijia would be the same as them, and annoy her, because of the same thing. How can we do that? We called Wu Mingho over because of Xinxin. If you don't go, won't it be awkward for us? However, Dong Lijia didn't relent. It seemed that he had to get her over. For the sake of his Xinxin's future mood, it was better to bring her over. Moreover, if she went now and saw Wu Mingho, she might wake up because she saw the person she liked. Thinking of this, Dong Lijia didn't say anything else, and immediately pulled Lin Wenwen back to the room to change clothes. Then he pulled, but it didn't budge. He pulled again, but it still didn't budge. 3 pulls. Lin Wenwen looked at him calmly. Pull, pull, pull. Let's see if you can move her with her current tonnage. Dong Lijia. Damn, he really couldn't pull her. Since he couldn't use force, he could only use his wits. Oh right, wasn't he in need of money now? How about this, you come with me? How about tonight? I give you another 500,000. Lin Wenwen. Damn, she really couldn't refuse this condition. 500,000 could buy a lot of food and medicine. She suddenly felt that this Dong Lijia was a bit sneaky. In the end, under the temptation of money, she still agreed. Anyway, it was just 2 hours less of training in the night. It wasn't a delay. Then Dong Lijia raised his eyebrows and smiled proudly. The young and handsome face was filled with the joy of victory, and the suffocation from being suppressed by Lin Wenwen was swept away. Before Lin Wenwen entered the room and saw his smile, she inexplicably had an urge to hit someone. Chapter 1173. When Lin Wenwen was tempted by Dong Lijia's money to attend second young Master Luo's birthday party, Yuan Tianqing asked old Guo to take everyone away from the underground river. He went back to find a place to block the river. When he returned to a position not far from the waterfall, he found that the water flow had slowed down. But the water level did not drop. And after the hole on the top of the waterfall was opened, the water flowing down the waterfall increased. He didn't know where this underground river led to. It would be great if it flowed into the sea. The big pufferfish with tentacles were no longer in front of the hole, but the hole that was originally 2 or 3 meters high was now 7 or 8 meters high. The pool under the waterfall was full of scattered stones. He looked around, and then jumped into the hole he had made in the rock wall. The severe pain from the skin on his shoulder and half of his chest made him groan. He took the flashlight and opened the clothes on his chest. He discovered that there were no burns on his skin. Instead, there was a patch of dark purple on his skin. The dark purple area was extremely painful. He touched it with his hand. As soon as his hand touched the skin, he couldn't help but scream because it was really painful. Yuan Tianxing took a deep breath, then closed his clothes, and turned to look at the big hole in the waterfall in the distance. He put the flashlight in his mouth, and put one hand on the wall to control the surrounding rocks. He had lost consciousness, and couldn't control the hand on the other side of the shoulder, while using a small part of the energy to suppress the explosive energy that invaded his body when the black water splashed on him. Yuan Tianxing conducted most of the energy into the wall, and then transferred it to the rock wall at the entrance of the hole. Then he began to use energy to control the formation of a large range of rocks around the hole. When facing the rocks under the ground, the earth ability could freely control their movement and growth. But the rocks here had been corroded by the river, and the rocks were full of the impact of a lot of the river's energy. That was why this energy weakened Yuan Tianxing's ability to control these rocks. Yuan Tianxing pressed alone on the rock wall, his physical body running at a high speed to transmit energy, and then used his mind to control the energy around to move the rocks on the waterfall. He saw that the rocks at the edge of the hole, which were a little rough and messy, began to slowly thicken and extend up and down. The stones below grow up, and the stones above grow down. The stone cracks on both sides began to close up and became thicker and thicker. Yuan Tianxing did not intend to block the entire river. If he blocked it, the water pressure that flowed down from the back would accumulate, and after a long time, it might explode here. Because there was still corrosive energy in the water, these rocks could not block the water forever. Therefore, he left a small hole, but the stones around the hole became very thick towards the lake, and they were so strong that the big monsters couldn't break them. After continuously increasing the thickness of the rocks inside to more than 20 meters, Yuan Tianxing was already sweating profusely. However, he still gritted his teeth and finally thickened the rock to more than 30 meters. Then, water flowed out of a tunnel that was 30 meters in length and 1 meter in diameter. After letting go, Yuan Tianxing immediately leaned against the wall and sat down. He leaned against the wall and panted heavily, but his expression was somewhat painful. His energy was almost used up, so he suppressed the energy in his injured area and reduced it a little. The energy of the river immediately began to collide with his flesh. It had almost corroded his flesh and blood. Watching the water flow on the waterfall become smaller, the water level in the pool began to slowly decline. Yuan Tianxing observed the lake inside the cave for a long time, and noticed that the breath of those things seemed to have sunk to the bottom of the lake. Then he gritted his teeth and jumped out of here. He followed his own breath back, and increasingly felt that his body movements were not smooth. The pain on the skin of his chest was slowly invading his internal cavity, and even made it a little difficult for him to breathe. Moreover, the oxygen underground was already a little thin, and now it made him feel even more uncomfortable. Fortunately, his will was still strong, and he forced himself to endure the physical discomfort and kept rushing back. However, his speed was much slower than before, and his footsteps were a little unsteady. Old Gua and the others waited for Yuan Tianxing at the entrance of the underground river, where the underground gorillas entered the underground river. Suddenly, he slightly raised his head to the direction of the underground river upstream, and slightly frowned. He's back. Although he had returned, why did his aura suddenly weaken so much? This degree of breath, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on much longer. Feeling that something was wrong, Old Gua immediately flashed and disappeared in place. When the others heard his voice, they all perked up. However, seeing that the old man suddenly disappeared in place, they did not immediately understand the meaning of his action. Only Li Zheng's reaction was a little faster, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. His expression also became solemn. Soon old man Guo returned with Yuan Tianxing. However, Yuan Tianxing was lying on his shoulder, and his entire head was hanging down. Deputy leader! Li Zhang and the others were shocked, and they all shouted out loud. He fainted. Quickly send him back, old Guo said in a low voice. But his footsteps did not stop, and he continued to jump into the underground gorilla's cave. The others quickly followed one after another. What's wrong with deputy leader? What happened? Li Zhang also moved quickly next to old Guo and asked anxiously. There's the energy breath in his body like in the river, and he has expended too much energy. So in order to suppress and resist this external invasion of destructive energy, his body automatically fell into a coma to protect itself, old Guo said. Expended too much energy? Deputy leader is already a level 7 supernatural ability, and he can actually use energy to the point of light. What is he doing in there? Li Zheng said worriedly and confusedly. Fortunately, when they came out, they all came out through the biggest tunnel in the underground gorilla's cave, and they quickly came out of the ground. After smelling their breath, Elmar immediately flashed out. How is it? Did you guys find anything? Huh, what's going on with Yuan Tianxing? As she spoke, she suddenly saw Yuan Tianxing being carried by old Guo, and immediately realized that something was wrong. He's injured. The others will tell you the situation. Call Lu Shanlin first, and let her send Yuan Tianxing back to the base's medical department. Old Guo placed Yuan Tianxing under Li Zhang, and then said to Elmarch. Lu Shanlin was a level 5 female zombie leader on Elmar's side, and at this time, they definitely needed a wind ability user to directly send Yuan Tianxing back to the base. Elmar turned her head and roared to the side. Roar! Lu Shanlin, come quickly. Soon. An average-looking female zombie wearing a camouflage military uniform of medium height appeared in front of everyone. Elmar immediately pointed at Yuan Tianxing and said to her, Hurry, send him back to the base's medical department to Lin Hao. Roar. Lu Shanlin immediately responded to her and turned around to walk towards Yuan Tianxing. She picked up his arm and put it on her shoulder, and in the blink of an eye disappeared. Li Zhang and the others immediately found their parked cars, and then quickly drove back to the base. Chapter 1174. After Yuan Tianxing passed out, Lin Wenwen, who was dragged to Luo Yuanjuan's birthday party by Dong Lijia, suddenly felt her heart skip a beat. She was standing in the corner of the party with a glass of red wine in her hand. The strange feeling in her heart made her raise her hand and press her chest. Then she frowned. An inexplicable feeling of suffocation spread from her heart and then quickly disappeared. But after that, she had a bad premonition in her heart. She raised her head and looked around, trying to figure out where this feeling was coming from. It was a very strange feeling. It didn't feel like she was being targeted or plotted against. It was as if something bad was about to happen that she couldn't predict. Suddenly, her mind became blurry, and a blurry image flashed by. In the image, there was a man with dark purple skin lying quietly. But before she could see the man's face clearly, the image suddenly disappeared. Lin Wenwen covered her forehead with her free hand. She felt that the man was very important to her, but she didn't know who it was. The image flashed by so fast that she couldn't see the man's face at all. She couldn't even see his figure clearly. On a seat not far from Lin Wenwen's right, a few elegantly dressed girls with exquisite makeup were secretly sizing up Lin Wenwen. Why doesn't she go near Wu Mingho? Why is she just standing there? Why is she covering her forehead? Qin Jiao stared at Lin Wenwen from the corner of her eyes, but she was facing the others. Lin Yuehui looked at the direction where the handsome men were gathered, and looked at Deng Chenfei with infatuation. Hearing Qin Jiao's words, she turned around and glanced at where Lin Wenwen was and said, Why don't we go over and pretend to drag her over there? Isn't it natural for us to use her to get close to Chenfei and the others? Qin Jiao's eyes lit up and she nodded. Sure. A short-haired girl next to them looked at the two of them, and then at Lin Wenwen. She said, "This fat girl is really brave to come. She'll just embarrass herself in this kind of situation." But she did choose a more suitable dress today, although it feels like she's wearing a mosquito net when she goes out. The other one excitedly urged Qin Jiao and the other girl, "Hey, you two better hurry up if you want to move. I'm still waiting to watch a good show." It just so happened that Wu Mingho was wearing white today. How cooperative. Qin Jiao stood up and said, "Let's go. She doesn't look right now. Let's go see what's wrong with her." Lin Wenwen was covering her forehead, trying to sense the ominous feeling, but the image was too blurry. She really couldn't see anything. A man? Why is his entire body dark purple? Could he have been poisoned? Who could it be? Recalling the strange feeling in his heart just now, the other party was definitely someone related to him. Could it be her big brother? Did something happen to Lin Hao? Damn it, her second ability didn't react at all. Now that there was finally some reaction, the result was this. Was it because she hadn't finished leveling up yet? Feeling the two women walking towards him, Lin Wenwen's heart inexplicably flashed a trace of irritation. Did they think that she couldn't feel the way these women looked at her just now? The calculating look in their eyes was too clear. There was no concealment at all. Now that they suddenly walked towards her, they were ready to take action. Originally, she wanted to carefully look for clues about the scene in her mind. She knew that the scene in her mind was definitely not an illusion, especially since it happened to someone she knew, and someone she cared about. But at this time, someone actually wanted to disturb her. Lin Wenwen turned around and walked in the opposite direction of Qin Jiao and Lin Hao. Originally, they didn't want to provoke her. Tonight, they just wanted to eat some food and drink some wine. She wanted to enjoy the scene that hadn't existed since the end of the world. However, there was still someone who was crazy and wanted to find trouble with her. Lin Wenwen turned around not because she was afraid of the other party, but because it was too troublesome to deal with them. It was better to escape. This kind of situation was too troublesome for women. Qin Jiao and Lin Hao pretended to walk unintentionally towards Lin Wenwen, but the other party's figure suddenly disappeared. Then he went in the direction of the washroom. A trace of displeasure and depression flashed in their hearts at the same time. Why couldn't he go to the washroom at any time? Why did he have to make a move? Seeing that Lin Wenwen had entered the washroom, Qin Jiao and Lin Yuehui could only secretly look at each other. Then they walked towards the wine table. Lin Wenwen sat on the toilet seat in the washroom and carefully thought about the scene just now. The man was lying down. She couldn't see his figure or height, but the dark purple body was too conspicuous. Who was it? What happened to him? Was the situation serious? Was he going to die? These questions filled her mind, and Lin Wenwen felt a little uneasy. No, she had to go back as soon as possible. She had to go back as soon as possible. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. Lin Wenwen suddenly stood up from the toilet seat. She directly opened the door and walked out. After washing her hands, she took the coarse paper from the washroom and dried her hands. Then she walked out. As soon as she walked out, she saw Qin Jiao and Lin Hao standing not far away. When they saw her come out, they immediately turned around. "Xin, you don't look too good. What's wrong?" Lin Yuehui looked at Lin Wenwen worriedly. "Did you eat something bad? Are you okay?" Qin Jiao helped to comfort her. Lin Wenwen expressionlessly shook her head and said, "I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." After saying that, she walked towards where Dong Lijia and the others were. Qin Jiao and Lin Hao looked at each other behind her and saw where she was going. Then they followed her. "Why do I feel that your sister is strange tonight?" On the other side, Dong Lijia and the others were also talking about his sister. The feeling that Dong Xinxin gave them tonight was a little strange. Moreover, his style of dressing had changed a lot. It was not like the unbearable style of before. Dong Lijia rolled his eyes and watched Lin Wenwen walk towards the washroom. In his mind, he was thinking that this bastard used his sister's body to enter the women's washroom. Although there seemed to be nothing wrong on the surface, he remembered that there was a man living in his sister's heart. It was so fucking perverted. After hearing Luo Yuanjuan's words, he replied nonchalantly, "Oh, maybe his brain short-circuited. Maybe his way of looking at things suddenly changed." However, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone else stared at him. Dong Lijia was stunned by their stares. Huh? Why are you looking at me? Did I say something wrong? The others just looked at him silently and did not say anything. He had always praised his sister. Why would he say that his beloved sister's brain short-circuited? Dong Lijia was also strange tonight. Chapter 1175. Lin Wenwen walked up to Dong Lijia and directly ignored the other high-quality handsome men. He said to Dong Lijia, "I'm going back, you guys have fun." Then she glanced at them indifferently and was about to leave. She was not in the mood to stay here anymore. "Hey fat ball, you've just arrived, haven't you? Why are you leaving so soon? That's so rude of you." A sunny young boy next to Dong Lijia heard her say that she wanted to leave and immediately said with some dissatisfaction. He made it clear that he was the host of this place, Luo Yuanjun, and he was the star of the show tonight. Dong Lijia had only brought Lin Wenwen here for less than 10 minutes, but Lin Wenwen said that she was leaving. It was indeed rude of her. Lin Wenwen glanced at him indifferently and then ignored him. If she remembered correctly, Dong Xinxin had asked her to beat this guy. How did Luo Yuanjun annoy her? Was it because he called Dong Xinxin fat ball? Why are you leaving so soon? Do you think you're here to watch the show? Dong Lijia was displeased to see that she was leaving so soon. He hadn't even talked to Wu Mingho, and she was leaving? Wouldn't it be a waste of time? Lin Wenwen spread out her hands. "I've promised you, and I'm already here. But I didn't promise you how long I would stay." That was to say, she was already here, so she couldn't go back on her words. As for when she would leave, it had nothing to do with him. "Yes, Xinxin, you've just arrived, haven't you? Why are you leaving so soon? The first round isn't over yet, and there's still the second round. The second round is our home court." Qin Jiao pulled Lin Yuehui over. After hearing their conversation, she immediately helped Dong Lijia. The venue was held in a high-end hotel, because the host was not Luo Yuanjun himself, but his father. Therefore, most of the people present were old, middle-aged people with high social status, or some business leaders. Only at 10 o'clock after the first round was over, the young people would find a place to have the second round. Therefore, the second round was what they wanted. However, Dong Xinxin was about to leave before the first round was over. It would be too early if he didn't go to the second round. Lin Wenwen smiled faintly and said, "Forget about the second round. You don't have to count me in. You can still have fun, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter if I'm here or not. There's an impact. It's affecting my mood. Come, Pang Qiu, tell me, why did you go back so early? If you go back early, you'll just be lying on the bed. Why do you pamper your fat body so much? You guys should train them." Seeing that Lin Wenwen was not joking, and that he really wanted to go back, Luo Yuanjun immediately stood up from the sofa and strode over. Naturally, he reached out and wrapped his arms around Lin Wenwen's neck, teasing her. If it was the Dong Xinxin of the past, he would have exploded long ago when he heard him keep mentioning his body. However, the one who came here today was not Dong Xinxin, but Lin Wenwen. She suddenly looked at Luo Yuanjun with a smile and said, "It's none of your business how I pamper them and train them. Just take care of yourself. Don't worry about others." Then, she turned her head and said to Dong Lijia, "That's it. I'll go first." Then, she turned around and walked out of the door, shaking Dong Xinxin's fat body. Dong Lijia looked at her huge back and thought that what she had just said was right. Then he looked at Wu Mingho, who didn't seem to care about Dong Xinxin at all. He didn't even look at Dong Xinxin. After thinking about it, he still chased after her. Luo Yuanjun, who was behind him, pointed at Deng Chenfei and said, "Dong Xinxin is really weird tonight. What's going on?" Deng Chenfei looked at the door and said, "It's not just tonight." Luo Yuanjun looked at him blankly and said, "What?" Qin Jiao and Lin Yuehui also looked at Lin Wenwen's back in a daze. They couldn't believe that she really left like that. She's really gone? If she left, what fun would there be? Not to mention the second scene. The first scene hadn't even started yet. How could she leave? Thinking of this, The two immediately followed Dong Lijia out. After Lin Wenwen walked out of the entrance of the venue, his bodyguard followed him. Anyway, she had a car to pick her up when she went out, so she didn't have to worry about how she would go back. Dong Lijia caught up with her and stopped her, saying, "Wait a minute, are you serious? Don't you think others will think of Xin if you leave like this? They will have a bad impression of her, you know?" Lin Wenwen looked back at him and said indifferently, "Do you think it's fun for me to come here? It's not your sister who is in this body now. What's the point of me coming here to make others like her? Let her do her own thing in the future. I think you should stop interfering with her life. It may not be good for her." Fortunately, Lin Feng wasn't like that, or she would be annoyed to death. Even if Dong Xin really liked Wu Mingho in the past, he was no longer the Dong Xin of the past. He probably didn't like Wu Mingho anymore. Therefore, Lin Wenwen felt that there was really no need for her to come here. If not for the fact that she needed money to buy gas now, he wouldn't come here with Dong Lijia. Hearing Lin Wenwen's indifferent words, Dong Lijia was stunned. Looking at the other person turn around and leave again, he just stood there quietly. He suddenly had a feeling of realization. Did he really ignore his baby sister's feelings in the past? And she was right. The one who came back now was Dong Xin after 7 years. His heart was no longer the same. Qin Jiao, who followed him out, saw Dong Lijia standing at the side of the corridor. They looked around but didn't see Dong Xin. Lijia, did you let your sister go? Why didn't you ask her to stay?" Qin Jiao's face darkened a little, but she had to continue talking to Dong Lijia with a fake smile. Although they were talking to Dong Lijia, their eyes were searching left and right. Their expressions were secretly annoyed, and their hearts were full of anger. Originally, they planned to let her accidentally fall in front of Wu Mingho when there were a lot of people. If she fell with such a heavy weight, it would be an earthquake. At that time, everyone's attention would be attracted to her. Wouldn't that be a funny scene? When they went to a nightclub for the second time, they could even make her drink. It was said that when she was drunk, she would go crazy and kiss everyone she saw. So when they got her drunk, there would be a good show to watch. However, they didn't expect that they would spend a lot of effort to make Luo Yuanjun call Dong Lijia and ask him to bring his sister here. In the end, he left after standing there for less than 10 minutes. He was so angry. He hadn't done anything yet. Chapter 1176. After Yuan Tianqing was sent back to the base, he immediately called someone to find Lin Hao. Lin Hao spent the whole night in the emergency room using his ability, but he still couldn't force the explosive energy out of Yuan Tianqing's body. The next day, Lin Hao was sweating profusely. He could only temporarily suppress Yuan Tianqing's injuries. Then, he used Lin Qiao's spatial lake water to soak Yuan Tianqing's entire body. Only after soaking Yuan Tianqing's entire body in the water could he completely stop the strange energy from spreading in his body. When Lin Hao came out of the ward with a tired face, everyone immediately looked at him carefully and expectantly. His body has a very strong explosive energy. Basically, half of the muscle cells in his chest have exploded, and his bones have also suffered some damage. Fortunately, his own energy automatically protected his liver and heart, so the energy didn't invade them. Otherwise, his life wouldn't be able to wait for the leader's return. Lin Hao said to everyone with a serious expression. Elmar and Geezer Guo went down to take a look, and found that the entrance to the waterfall was blocked by Deputy Leader Yuan using his ability. I'm guessing he spent too much of his supernatural energy there, causing his injuries to worsen. While waiting for Yuan Tianqing's treatment, Li Zheng received a message from Elmarch. Lin Feng frowned and said, "Then you mean he still needs to wait for the leader to come back? You can't do anything here?" Lin Hao shook his head. "My ability is too weak in suppressing the energy in Brother Tianqing's body. We can only wait for the leader to come back." He couldn't control the spatial lake water left by Lin Qiao to treat Yuan Tianqing, and if it wasn't for the energy in the lake water, he wouldn't be able to do anything about the abnormal destructive energy in Yuan Tianqing's body. Hearing Lin Hao's words, everyone's faces became very disappointed and worried. You mean with his current situation, he can only wait for the leader to come back for a change? Lin Feng thought about it and asked Lin Hao. That's right, but I can't judge whether this is a good or bad thing. But I think the leader should have a way. Lin Hao's words meant that he could only place his hope on Lin Xiao. Lin Feng looked up at the door of the ward, then sighed and turned to leave. After Lin Xiao left, something happened to Lin Wenwen and Yuan Tianxing one after another. This really wasn't a good sign. There were also more and more unsettling factors appearing underground. He felt that a huge crisis was slowly approaching. In any case, even the apocalypse had come, and the virus had broken out twice. Lin Feng suddenly realized that he was already somewhat used to this kind of catastrophic situation. Meanwhile, in Lin Xiao's home, Wu Qingyue was nursing Tingting while listening to Xiao Liqing tell him about the news from various places. So, Xikong Chen returned empty-handed? Wu Qingyue took the bottle and tried to stuff it into Tung Tung's mouth, but Tung Tung dodged left and right, not wanting to eat the bottle, and struggled on his legs. Probably. Anyway, the news said that they came out first. Miss Lu and Lan Lu haven't come out yet. Also, the aura of that level 9 Arcanist has stopped rampaging, which means that he has been knocked unconscious. Xiao Liqing stood in front of him and looked at Tung Tung, who was running around in his boss's arms. The corners of his mouth twitched as he reported the situation. With Lan Lu here, he definitely won't let anyone kill that 9th rank Arcanist. Also, after that female zombie arrived, he stopped rampaging. Looks like she should have helped. After all, her invisibility skill could have gotten very close to the back of the Berserk Arcanist. Alright Tung Tung, are you going to drink or not? You're really troublesome. Wu Qingyue thought about it, and after analyzing the situation, he came to the conclusion he had imagined. However, he was a little angry at the disobedient little brat in his arms. I don't want a bottle. I don't want a bottle. Put it in a bowl for me to drink. Tung Tung turned his body and used the back of his head to face him and shouted. It will get cold very quickly if you put it in a bowl, and the cold milk will have a fishy smell. When the time comes, you won't drink it again. Hurry up. I'm going to be angry. Although Wu Qingyue had a straight face, his tone was still very gentle. The weather was already very cold, the end of November was approaching December, and the temperature was very low during the day and at night. This little brat had not been eating seriously recently. The milk that was brewed for him always turned cold after a few mouthfuls. Then he would shout that it wasn't good to drink something. What a troublesome little brat. Putting it in a bottle could at least keep it warm. But this little brat refused to drink it no matter what. I don't want it, just pour it into a bowl. I will definitely finish it. Tung Tung still refused. Wu Welling, who was at the side, obediently ate her food, and from time to time raised her head to look at the father and son. Her expression was very relaxed, and there was even a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Wu Qingyue sighed, and could only pour out the milk in the bottle. Then he asked Xiao Liqing, by the way, did you find the information on that level 9 paranormal? Xiao Liqing nodded. I found it. His name is Dong Xiaowei. However, I heard that the location of Qingshan base is rather remote, and it seems to be in a mental hospital in a town. Dong Xiaowei, Lan Lu, and the others were actually patients with some mental illness in the past, but I don't know why they have become normal now. Maybe the energy of the paranormal ability repaired their mental domain. And Lan Lu is also a mental type, Wu Qingyue said. With the current situation, I don't know when Miss Lu will return to the base. The situation underground is not very clear. Maybe she will be able to find out something from those gorillas when she returns. Xiao Liqing said with a slight frown. It's been a night, and Lin Hao still hasn't come out. It seems that Yuan Tianxing's injuries are very serious. Even a level 7 paranormal was so seriously injured. The situation underground is definitely not simple. But where did that energy come from? Wu Qingyue already knew the purpose of Yuan Tianxing's operation, and also the result. However, he did not personally go down to check, so his understanding of the situation was still a little vague. But even the level 7 paranormal Yuan Tianxing came back with serious injuries, which meant that the situation underground was not only dangerous, but also a big problem. And this big problem was slowly spreading to the surface. Could it be that something has changed underground that has caused these phenomena to appear? But if that's the case, it seems that this kind of change is very dangerous for us humans and other creatures. Xiao Liqing's thoughts were also in line with his. Our senses are not as sensitive as those zombies, but even Xiao Lily and Elmar can't detect it. This means that the situation is not critical. We should still have some time. Xiaodong, can you drink your milk? Why are you looking at me? I'm already full. As Wu Qinghua spoke, he lowered his head and glared at the little ghost in his arms. Chapter 1177. The news from the northwest took a little longer due to the distance, so Wu Qinghua only just found out that Xikongchen had retreated. Lin Xiao was already on the way back with her troops. A slightly modified convoy was still moving at high speed on the highway, but the last car had a big mushroom growing on top of it. It was blown by the wind, but it still stood firmly on top. Awa! In Lin Xiao's car, a young tiger was pouncing on the side of the window, roaring out from time to time. Lin Xiao sat in the passenger seat and turned her head to the back and said, "Can you be quiet? You won't be able to run for long. Even if you aren't tired, I am." The little tiger's running speed wasn't slow, but it was still too small, so it didn't have enough stamina. If it was released to run behind the convoy, it would only be able to run for half an hour before collapsing. The mushroom also liked to run, but after running for a few hours, it jumped onto the roof of the car and refused to move. Only Wang and Ahei were leisurely running in the woods by the roadside. Because of their level 6 stamina, they could run for a few days and nights without stopping, and the speed of the car wasn't very fast. To them it was like jogging. In fact, the mushroom was the same, but it seemed to be tired of running. Awa! After Lin Xiao said that, the little tiger turned its head and roared at her. Then, he lay on the chair and flicked his tail left and right. "When do you think Blue Land will find the level 8 energy core for you?" Duan asked while driving. "It shouldn't be long, didn't you notice?" After the second outbreak of the virus, the strength of the mutant beasts and plants increased, and their speed of leveling up also increased. Otherwise, how could we see 2 level 8 mutant beasts together? Now the frequency of level 6 and 7 mutant beasts is quite high. Lin Xiao looked out of the window and said lightly, "That seems to be true." Duan thought about it and realized that it was true. However, the speed of human mutants has slowed down, while the zombies have increased. Lin Xiao continued. Suddenly, she looked at the road in front of her and said, "Stop the car." Screech. Duan slammed on the brakes and stared in front of her in confusion. She then turned to look at her. "What's wrong?" "Woo woo woo." The little tiger behind suddenly let out a low warning sound. Duan looked in the rearview mirror and saw that it had begun to shrink. Its back was arched, its limbs were tucked under its body, and its tail was curled under its belly. He bared his teeth, and the 2 round little ears on his head were pressed down. His eyes seemed to have seen something terrifying, and he revealed a somewhat panicked expression. "There's something in front." With a serious expression, Lin Xiao opened the car door and got out. He stood beside the car and began to carefully observe the surroundings. They were on a highway with mountains on both sides. There were no towns nearby, so it was a bit desolate. Lin Xiao felt a familiar, yet uneasy aura slowly approaching them. However, she could not sense the source of this aura. She sniffed the air around her, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. However, she could still feel that something was approaching. "What is it?" Duan also got out of the car and walked to her side. She carefully looked around and asked. Lin Xiao raised her hand and directly put the little tiger and the car into her space. Then she shouted to the people behind, "Be careful." After everyone got out of the car, Lin Xiao put all the cars into her space one by one, leaving only the people outside. After hearing Lin Xiao's shout, everyone immediately focused their attention and vigilantly observed their surroundings. At this moment, there was a slight tremor on the ground of the highway. Underground, Li Kui looked down at the ground and said aloud. Everyone could already feel the tremor coming from underground, and not above ground. Lin Xiao frowned, and suddenly, A bad feeling flashed through her heart. Everyone be careful. The thing coming down might be the same type as those multi-eyed monsters. She reminded everyone, then jumped up and landed on top of a tall mutated tree in the forest not far away. She stood tall and was ready to wait for the thing underground to appear. When everyone saw what she did, they all followed suit and jumped onto some tall trees. After waiting for a full 10 minutes, the ground of the highway began to shake violently, and then cracks began to appear on the road. The cracks were slowly getting bigger and bigger, and a dangerous and disgusting aura gushed out of the cracks along with a thick black gas. What is that? Shui Mingjun frowned and asked in confusion. Ink, who was standing on the same branch as him, said expressionlessly, I don't know, it probably isn't anything good. The smell is disgusting. Saying that, she frowned and moved her nose, but in the end, she couldn't help but pinch it with her hand. Looking at the others, all the zombies were covering their noses with their hands. Shui Mingjun sniffed strangely and then said, Why do you all seem to smell a very bad smell? Why can't I smell it? Ink looked at him and said in a nasal voice, Because you're not a zombie. Do you want to try becoming like us? Shui Mingjun shook his head repeatedly. No need. Lin Xiao also covered her nose. It was a strange smell that was very pungent to her. It was very unpleasant and irritating to their noses. It was also very disgusting. Woof woof woof. Woof woof. Air Wang was also jumping left and right on the side of the road, barking at the cracks with his teeth. Only the mushroom spirit and the big black snake slipped into the forest and disappeared, not knowing where they went. Obviously, they felt that it was too dangerous here, and they couldn't handle it, so they didn't dare to stay. Could it be the thing you guys saw before? Duan Wan stood on the same tree as Lin Xiao, but her position was lower than Lin Xiao. She squatted on the branch and looked down at the situation on the other side of the highway. Lin Xiao shook her head. Her eyes were a little more alert as she stared at the cracks on the road and said, No, the aura is different. And the energy in this black gas is also different. It doesn't seem to be the same species. The ground was still shaking, and the cracks were getting bigger and bigger. The black gas that gushed out of the ground began to spread in all directions. Lin Xiao carefully stared at the plants that the black gas came into contact with, and sure enough, the situation that she saw with the multi-eyed monster appeared. The plants instantly lost their vitality and withered, but the surroundings didn't turn pitch black like the area with the multi-eyed monster. Instead, it was a dim yellow. After the plants withered, they instantly turned into yellow sand and dust that scattered in the air. The air quality in this area instantly dropped. Chapter 1178. Duan Wan quickly took out an isolation mask and put it on, preventing herself from breathing in the poisonous gas. It was common sense to wear an anti-gas mask when walking outside a survivor's camp. Everyone would carry a mask that could be worn in case of any poisonous gas. Shui Mingjun and Yin Huiguang, who often walked outside, silently took out their own equipment and put it on. As the black gas grew more and more, the surrounding plants began to turn into sand and were blown away by the wind, gradually forming a barren land. This time, it's actually this kind of effect. Lin Xiao looked at the changes in the surroundings. As the gas grew more and more, it began to spread with the wind, gradually extending towards the tree they were standing on. Lin Xiao and Duan Wan leapt backwards, quickly leaving their original position. They watched as the surrounding trees began to gradually dry up and turn into sand. Only a few higher-level mutated plants were still tenaciously holding on. Very quickly, the surrounding mutated plants all turned into sand and scattered, leaving only 2 level 4 and 5 mutated trees. They were constantly releasing the energy within their energy cores to resist the destructive energy of the black gas, ensuring their own safety. However, if there came a day when their energy was completely released, then it would be time for them to wither and die. What the hell is coming out? How can this gas have such terrifying energy? Duan Wan retreated a few hundred meters away and landed on another tree with Lin Xiao. She then looked at the surroundings that were gradually turning into sand, and her eyes revealed a bewildered expression. Lin Xiao flashed and stood firmly on the tree, silently staring at the cracks in the ground. After a few seconds, she suddenly opened her mouth and said, "It's coming out." The others landed not far away from her, and after hearing her words, they all stared at the location of the cracks. Very quickly, the cracks in the ground that were emitting black gas had split open a few meters wide. The entire 200 to 300 meters of the road was filled with such huge cracks, and the tremors underground had also stopped. Roar dash! A strange sound came out from underground. After everyone heard this strange sound, they all focused their gazes. They saw a huge blood-red claw extend out from the cracks, and with a boom sound, it scratched the ground. A few deep claw marks were left on the concrete asphalt road. Red, and the claw is so big. Lin Xiao squinted his eyes when he saw the claw. This red claw was at least as big as a small car, and its thick clawed arm pushed upwards forcefully. A huge red head squeezed out from the crack in the ground. It was a strange-looking head, with 2 curved horns on its head and 2 small round ears below the horns. 2 large blood-red eyes were looking around. The claws that were a few meters long were already very big, but this giant head seemed to be at least 3 times the size of the claws. Even the width of the crack in the ground was not enough for its entire head to come out, and it had to be squeezed out. As for what this head looked like, it was actually a bit like a feline, just that it didn't have fluffy fur. Both its head and its claws were covered with thick blood-red skin. However, the vertical pupil in the middle of its round red eyes made it look like a huge, strange cat. Awooh! The strange red cat opened its huge mouth and roared at the sky, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. When it roared, it even spat out a thick black gas from its mouth. Then it began to struggle and stretched out another claw, then a third, and a fourth. A fifth. Don't tell me they are all its claws. When Yen Xiao saw the appearance of the 5th claw, she suddenly had a bad feeling. Then, she saw the huge cat's struggle became even more intense, and the crack in the ground was slowly pushed open by it, revealing the rest of its body. Suddenly, it shrank down slightly, and then rushed out with a loud noise. Bang! After the crack in the road exploded, its body finally jumped out from the ground. Roar! A 6-legged blood-red hairless huge cat swung its snake-like tail and landed on the ground. It seemed to be very excited as it roared at the sky. Then, it swung its tail a few times in the same place before stopping and moving its nose to sniff the surrounding air. Seeing its actions, everyone around it subconsciously held their breaths and restrained their aura. They were afraid that it would suddenly discover them and pounce on them to eat. However, this monster with 6 claws, a height of at least 7 to 8 meters, a body length of more than 10 meters, and a tail that was more than 20 meters long, only sniffed the surrounding air before leaping in another direction without any interest. When it leaped more than 20 meters into the air, it suddenly disappeared into thin air. It disappeared. Everyone was a little stunned by this phenomenon. They thought that after this guy came out, it might cause some commotion in the area, or cause a huge commotion. But after it came out, it only spun a few rounds on the spot, then jumped into the air and disappeared? Lin Xiao frowned and continued to stare at the ground, only to find that the bottom of the crack had returned to a calm state. She carefully stared at the hole that the strange cat crawled out of. Suddenly, her eyes flashed, and she turned her head in another direction. There, a mutated giant bird flew out from a deserted tree, then flew in a circle in the air, and then flew back to the ground. Lin Xiao stared at the giant bird seriously, and found that the giant bird stood on the ground that had turned into sand, but there was no change at all. The bird's level was actually not high, it was only level 2, but it stood there safe and sound, not affected by the situation of the desertification. Puff puff puff. A few sounds came from the other side. Then, the giant bird spread its wings and flew toward the place where the sounds came from. Awoo! After the giant bird flapped its wings there, it grabbed the sand with its claws, then suddenly flew up into the sky. She saw its claws hook up a mutated rabbit the size of a normal medium-sized dog, flew into the sky, and then flew away. Alive? Lin Xiao murmured in a strange voice. What alive? Duan asked her strangely. That bird and the rabbit. The bird is only level 2. And the rabbit doesn't even have a level, it's just a mutation. But they are fine within the range of the black gas. Lin Xiao pointed to the giant bird that flew away and said, this meant that the black gas seemed to only react to plants. It had no effect on living creatures. Is that so? Duan looked at the direction she pointed, puzzled, and then turned to look at the area that had a radius of more than 300 meters that was covered in yellow sand. Then, she suddenly saw a few mice that were bigger than normal cats jump out of the sand and run into the surrounding forest. It really seemed like nothing happened. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.